When I was young, the only thing I cared about was beating my brothers. Mark and Mike were older than me, and that meant they were bigger, stronger, and better. In basketball, baseball, everything. They pushed me. They drove me. I wanted to beat them more than anything, more than anyone. But I hadn't met Magic yet. Once I did, he was the one I had to beat. What I had with Magic went beyond brothers. I never let on how much he dominated my thoughts during my playing days. I couldn't. But once we agreed to do this book, I knew it was finally time to let people in on my relationship with the person who motivated me like no other. Our careers, right from the start, were headed down the same path. We played each other for the college national championship and then went to the pros in exactly the same year. He was West Coast, I was East Coast, and both of us were playing for the two best NBA franchises of all time. You couldn't have made it up any better. I didn't like how it went in the beginning. It was always Bird and Magic instead of the Celtics and Lakers, and that didn't seem right to me. We didn't even guard each other. I did have incredible respect for Magic, more than anyone else I ever competed against. From the first time I saw him, I could see he approached the game the same way I did. It's all about the competition, and that's what both of us shared. That's what we both thrived on. My teammates used to rip Magic all the time. They made fun of his smile, his showtime routine. But when you got right down to it and asked them what they honestly thought, even they had to admit he's the best. I didn't spend a whole lot of time comparing myself to him. We were two totally different players with a few similarities. We both loved to pass the ball and keep our teammates involved. Neither one of us cared about scoring 50 points, although we both could have done that just about any time we wanted when we were at our best. I'd watch highlights of Magic after a game and I'd say, how did he do that? He controlled the tempo of the game like nobody else I've ever seen. There were times when we played the Lakers and I'd be the only guy back on one of their 3-on-1 breaks. Even though I'm not that quick, I used to be able to read the point guard in those situations and have an idea of which way he was leaning. Not with Magic. I never had any idea what he was going to do with that ball. We didn't like each other that much. It was too hard. We were trying to beat each other year after year, and people kept comparing us. I wanted what he had, so I didn't want to get to know him because I knew I'd probably like him, and then I'd lose my edge. People think it all started with the NCAA championship in 1979. It didn't. We were teammates the summer before that in an international competition, and we made some incredible plays together. Too bad nobody saw them. The coach didn't play us, so we had to figure out other ways besides playing in the games to prove we belonged among the best college players. Trust me, you'll see when you read this. We figured out ways to get noticed. In this book, we'll give you the inside story of our days leading up to the NCAA National Championship, not what I call the fish stories that are out there. Through the years, countless people who were on the fringe of our Indiana State team have been quoted about what I was doing or what I was thinking back then. I'm always amused by that because I barely know them, which is why they never get the story right. People who have the least to do with the success of a team often have the most to say about it. That's one of the reasons Magic and I decided to do this book together. For once, you can hear from us what we were feeling when we played against each other for the NCAA championship and those NBA championships. It's been an interesting ride, believe me. It hasn't always been a smooth one either. When you are as competitive as the two of us are, there's going to be bad feelings along the way. I had them, and after doing this project, I've learned Magic had some too. After years of battling each other, people couldn't think of one of us without the other. We were Frazier and Ali. When I retired, people asked me about him all the time. They'd say, "Is Magic okay? Have you seen him?" Even more than my own teammates. 9 times out of 10, it was So what's Magic doing? And 1 time out of 10 it was, what's McHale up to these days? It's hard to explain what it's like to be linked to someone like that. We didn't choose for it to be that way. It just happened. And now we're stuck with each other. Once, a few years ago, I was driving down the road in my car and I got a call from a television reporter in Indianapolis. He asked me, "Have you heard the news?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, it isn't confirmed yet, but we've got a report that Magic Johnson died." I almost went off the road. I got this pit in my stomach and I really felt like I was going to lose it. I hung up and called Jill Leone, my agent, right away. She got on the phone with Lon Rosen, Magic's agent, and he told her it was a bad rumor, that Magic was fine. I called that TV guy back and said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." People have been writing about Magic and me for years. Some of it they got right, some of it they didn't. This is our story, from the 2 people who lived it. When the Celtics and the Lakers played in the 2008 finals, it brought back a lot of great memories for me. Those were the greatest times of my life, those battles with Magic and the Lakers. They were all I thought about. Nothing was sweeter than beating L.A. We fought like hell for the same thing for over 12 years, and through it all, the respect was always there. For the rest of our lives, we're connected. I used to mind. I don't anymore. Larry Bird, Indianapolis, March 2009. From Magic. My high school coach, George Fox, used to tell me to never take my talent for granted. "You're special, Irvin," Fox used to say, "but you can't stop working hard. Just remember, there's someone out there who is just as talented as you are, and he's working just as hard, maybe even harder." When Coach Fox told me those things, I'd nod my head, but in my mind I was thinking, I'd like to meet this guy because I haven't seen him. Truthfully, I wasn't sure anybody like that existed. That changed the day in 1978 when I walked into a gym in Lexington, Kentucky, and met Larry Bird for the first time. Then I knew he was the guy Coach Fox was talking about. Larry was a different kind of cat. He didn't say much, and he kept to himself. But oh, could he play. I had never seen a player with his size pass the ball the way he did. Right away, we had chemistry. We played on the second team with a bunch of college all-stars, and we just embarrassed the starters. I knew I'd see him again, and I did. Everywhere. When I got to the NBA and played for the Lakers, I watched as many Celtics games as I could so I could keep track of what he was doing. He became my measuring stick. The first time we played head-to-head in the finals in 1984, Larry got the best of me. It took me years to get over it. Actually, I'm not sure I'm over it yet. I was surprised to hear Larry describe watching me win the NBA championship in my rookie season. He admitted he was jealous, which really shocked me because he never ever showed it back then. Of course, as you'll learn when you start reading this book, I had my own bouts of jealousy when it came to Larry. When I go out and speak to people, I tell them I wish their kids had a chance to see Larry Bird play, because he did it the right way. He played a team game, but it was his will to win, his toughness, his spirit, and his knowledge of the game that I admired the most. I'm tied to Larry. Forever, that's just how it is. I wanted the two of us to walk into the Hall of Fame together, but we didn't get a chance to do that, so this book is the next best thing. It gives us a chance to tell our story and share with you the evolution of our friendship. Some of it will surprise you. I knew while we were playing I was doggedly scrutinizing Larry's every move, but I had no idea until we started talking for this book that he was following me just as closely. I can't get away from Larry. I bet he can't get away from me either. I run into fans all the time, and the first thing they want to know is, have you seen him? Have you talked to Larry? No one ever asks me about Kareem or James Worthy or Byron or Coop. It's always Larry. We've gotten used to that. When I go around the country, I always get a nice reception, especially in Boston. The people tell their children, "You missed it. Larry and this guy here put on a show. We used to hate this guy, but we respected him." Every time I walk into the new Boston Garden, I have tons of memories. I swear, they still have the same guys putting down that parquet floor that they had when I played. It takes me back to the day. The Beat LA t-shirts, the vendors outside, the cold showers, the fire alarms in the middle of the night when we stayed at the Boston hotels. There has never been a better rivalry. What we try to do in this book is put you right in the thick of it. Like in 1984, just after the Celtics have won the championship. I'm stuck in a Boston hotel room, looking down at all those Celtics fans going crazy in the street. And you won't believe where Larry is. Sometimes I'll pop in some of the old Celtics-Lakers games. I never get tired of watching them. On each team, there are 5 bodies moving in sync with each other. Usually, we scored 60 points by halftime. It was basketball poetry. When I'm watching those games, I can't help but notice the intensity on Larry's face, and on my own face. We never took a single play off. We couldn't afford to, because if we did, the other guy would exploit it. Can you imagine what it's like to have a player of Larry Bird's caliber pushing you night after night? It wore me out. It took some time for us to get to know each other. It's hard to develop a relationship with someone who wants exactly the same thing that you want. We were different, that's for sure. I was very emotional on the court, while often Larry never even changed expression. Inside, I knew his heart was pounding just as fast as mine, but there were countless times I'd look at him and wonder, what's he thinking? Now, finally, I know. I always wanted to work with Larry on a project like this. The love and respect I have for him is genuine. I've never met anyone else like him. That's because there's only one Larry Bird. I'm proud to call him my friend. Irvin Magic Johnson, Jr., Los Angeles, March 2009. Chapter 1. April 9th, 1978, Lexington, Kentucky. The errant shot came off the glass at a sharp angle, but Larry Bird, charting the flight of the ball, pulled down the rebound and advanced without hesitation, swiveling his head as he examined his options. Irvin Johnson had already begun to head down the court the moment the ball was in flight. He'd been playing with Bird for only 6 days on a team of college all-stars in this international round-robin competition, yet already Johnson had determined that Bird was the most resourceful rebounder they had. Bird filled the center lane, and Magic streaked down the right side, calling for the ball. But the forward looked away, as if he had pressing matters elsewhere. For one brief instant, Magic was disappointed. "I guess he's not going to give it to me," he murmured. And that's when it came, a behind-the-back missile that landed directly on Magic's right palm. It remained there just long enough for Johnson to disarm defender Andrei Lapatov with a crossover dribble, then sling it back over his shoulder with a no-look feed to Bird. Indiana State star barely aligned the seams before his touch pass was back to Magic, leaving no time for the overmatched Soviet player to react. As Johnson banked in the layup, the crowd at Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky, roared with delight. Magic turned and charged toward Bird to offer him his signature high five. Bird slapped the teenager's hand, and the two jogged back down the floor, side by side, one skipping, clapping, and celebrating as he went, the other, head down, expressionless, as if nothing remarkable had occurred. The intertwined basketball journey of Irvin Magic Johnson and Larry Joe Bird had officially begun as teammates. Johnson had never met Bird before the tournament. He was stunned at how well the forward passed the ball, and when Bird fed him the no-look pass, Magic told himself, "I'm not going to let this guy upstage me." It was an incredible 3 seconds of basketball, Magic said. It was boom, boom, boom. I'm thinking, man, I love playing with this guy. And believe me, the crowd loved it too. Some 30 years after that collaborative transition basket executed against the Soviet Union's national team when Magic was just 18 years old and Bird only 21, both remember the play with startling clarity. The defender was stumbling to keep up with us, Bird recalled. We were coming at him so fast that his head was going around and around, and he ended up in a circle. I was sort of laughing because the poor kid didn't have a clue. He wasn't the only one. No one thought to chronicle the footage of Bird and Magic's wizardry in the open floor. There were no breathless descriptions of the artful passers in the morning papers. In 1978, though both had displayed a developing basketball pedigree, they were not widely recognized as elite players. At that juncture, neither had won an NBA championship, a league MVP, or for that matter, an NCAA title. The irony of Bird and Magic commencing their storied relationship as teammates did not register, because their parallel careers had not yet evolved into one of the compelling rivalries in basketball history. They were certainly good, noted Michael O'Coran, their tournament teammate, but they weren't Magic and Larry. Not yet. Instead, Johnson and Bird were second stringers on an amateur basketball team participating in an international round-robin competition called the World Invitational Tournament, or WIT, attempting in vain to prove to the coach, Joe B. Hall, they were worthy of prime-time minutes. Although Bird and Magic occasionally shared knowing glances when the two of them outwitted the starters in practice, Bird revealed little of himself to Johnson. He was a young man of few words, until he went back home to French Lick, Indiana, and tracked down his brother, Mark Bird. "I've just seen the best player in college basketball," Larry gushed. "It's Magic Johnson." The World Invitational Tournament was a whirlwind, made-for-television event that assembled a group of top college players and held 3 games in 5 days against the Soviets, Cuba, and Yugoslavia at rotating venues: the Omni in Atlanta, Carmichael Auditorium on the campus of North Carolina, and Rupp Arena in Lexington. Bird had just completed his junior season at Indiana State as a first-team All-America selection who would be drafted by the Boston Celtics within the next 3 months. Magic had just finished his first year at Michigan State, a third-team All-America pick who had dazzled the Big Ten with his array of no-look feeds, alley-oops, and backdoor bounce passes. Yet on the World Invitational team, also known as the Converse Cup, Johnson and Bird were afterthoughts. The headliners were Joe B. Hall and his Kentucky Wildcats, who had beaten Duke 94-88 the previous week to capture the NCAA championship. Coach Hall placed 5 of his guys on the WIT roster. Swingman Jack Goose Givens, who had poured in 41 points in the title game against Duke, Rick Roby, their rugged big man, point guard Kyle Macy, lefty forward James Lee, and guard Jay Shidler. Givens, Macy, and Roby garnered most of the minutes in the tournament, even though the second team, anchored by Johnson and Bird, dominated them in practice. Privately, both players fumed as they sat and watched inferior players gobble up their minutes. "There were the Kentucky players, and the rest of us were fillers," Bird said. Hall wanted to go around the country and show off his guys. Bird and Magic spent a total of 8 days together during the WIT. They engaged in no more than 4 or 5 conversations, even though they ate together, practiced together, and rode the bus together. While Magic hobnobbed with Arkansas star Sidney Moncrief, blasting his boombox and jiving to the beat of the Ohio players, Bird remained largely to himself, surveying the Kentucky scenery out the bus window while Magic's music and personality overtook the team. "Magic was non-stop chatter," said Rutgers star James Bailey, and Larry said 0. It was good morning and don't expect a lot more. The World Invitational Tournament was the concoction of television executive Eddie Einhorn. While professional basketball in the 1970s produced dismal ratings, the colleges, provided the matchups had some national appeal, were proving to be a market with potential. Einhorn had already successfully televised exhibition games against Russians and felt that a competition with some international flavor would prove to be successful. Thus, the WIT was born. Einhorn enlisted the help of Brandeis athletic director Dick Rodas and Providence College basketball coach Dave Gavitt, prominent members of the Amateur Basketball Association of the United States, later renamed USA Basketball, to fill out the roster around the Kentucky players. At that time, I really didn't even know who Magic and Larry were, Einhorn admitted. I would venture to say most other people didn't either. Gavitt was painfully aware of the abilities of Michigan State's imposing point guard. Just weeks earlier, Magic and his Spartans had steamrolled Gavitt's Providence Friars in the opening round of the 1978 NCAA Mid-East Regional in Indianapolis. Magic scored 14 points and dished out 7 assists, but his ability to push tempo and provide his teammates with high-percentage shots — Michigan State hit 61% of its field goals — was what caught Gavitt's eye. Johnson saw the game differently than the other players, almost as if he were watching the action unfold in slow motion. Bird's Indiana State team posted a 23-9 mark that spring but was left out of the NCAA field, relegated instead to the less prestigious NIT tournament. Gavitt had never seen him play and knew little about him. Since Indiana State was not being featured on network television, many basketball fans assumed Bird was African American. Boston Globe writer Bob Ryan hadn't seen Larry yet either, but was already well versed in Bird lore. Ryan was in Indianapolis to cover Providence, but informed Gavitt he also was driving to Terre Haute to check out the Sycamores and this mysterious hidden gem, whom Celtics scouts assured him was a legitimate NBA prospect. Ryan embarked on his pilgrimage with Providence Journal sports writers Mike Madden and Jason Stark, who were openly skeptical of Bird's credentials. He was playing at a small school in a small conference, which, they surmised, accounted for his prolific offensive numbers. The writers barely had time to remove their jackets before the right-handed Bird snared a rebound and started up the left side of the floor, dribbling left-handed. Just shy of midcourt, he fired an underhand rocket pass to his guard off the dribble for a layup. From that moment on, I was hooked, said Ryan. Indiana State went on to win by a point on a jumper by Bird. Ryan was so animated talking about his performance on the way back to Indianapolis, he was driving 75 miles per hour when the state police pulled him over. Sorry, Ryan told the trooper. I'm just excited because I'm coming back from the ISU game. Oh, yeah? Said the cop, ripping up the ticket. Who won? The next morning, the Scribes were back courtside in Indianapolis to witness another legend in the making, a 6'8" and growing floor general who dominated play without a consistent jump shot. Magic was a whirling dervish of energy and enthusiasm. Even though he was just a freshman, he barked orders to his older teammates, and after every successful play, slapped hands, whooped, and celebrated with his teammates. The Friars players took offense at his histrionics, particularly in light of the lopsided score, 77-63. Some people thought he was a hot dog, Gavitt said. I never did. He played like he loved the game. There was a lot of high fives and fist pumping, which you didn't see a whole lot of back then. I suppose it was annoying if you were on the other team. I asked his coach, Judd Heathcote, about it, and he said, Dave, he's like that every day in practice. Not some days, every day. After Gavitt met with the press and gave proper credit to Michigan State and their remarkable blossoming star, he bumped into Bob Ryan in the hallway. So, how did your hidden gem do in Terre Haute, he asked. Dave, Ryan answered, I just saw one of the game's next great players. When it came time to flush out the World Invitational Team roster, Gavitt recalled Ryan's endorsement and added both Magic and Bird to his list. Bird was ecstatic about being chosen until he learned the identity of the coach. Joe B. Hall recruited Bird out of Springs Valley High School in French Lick, Indiana, but after watching him, Hall determined that Bird was too slow to play Division I basketball. A wounded Bird vowed to prove him wrong someday and was disappointed that he never had the opportunity to play against Kentucky in college. "I wanted a crack at that guy," Bird said. The odds of that happening were slim. Kentucky was one of the more prestigious programs in the country. Their conference, the Southeastern, was known primarily as a football hotbed, with heavyweights Alabama, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia among its members. The Wildcats, under the tutelage of Adolph Rupp, had established themselves as one of the top basketball powers in the country in the late 1940s, winning 4 NCAA championships in 10 years. Indiana State simply didn't measure up, and neither did Michigan State, at least not until students named Irvin and Larry arrived on their respective campuses and instantly altered the basketball landscape. Michigan State competed in the glamorous Big Ten Conference, but largely in the shadow of state rival Michigan, which stole the spotlight through the years with stars like George Lee, Cassie Russell, Rudy Tomjanovich, Phil Hubbard, and Ricky Green, all of whom would go on to enjoy successful NBA careers. While the Spartans produced their own crop of NBA alumni, Bob Branham, Johnny Green, Al Ferrari, Ralph Simpson, the program experienced only moderate success. Their cachet paled in comparison to their Ann Arbor neighbors, and they were reminded of it regularly. "We were the stepsons," explained Heathcote. "We always told our players, every game counts just once on the schedule, except for Michigan games. They counted 1.5. One of the few highlights in Michigan State history before Magic's arrival was the success of former coach Pete Newell, who guided the Spartans from 1950 to 1954, then migrated west to the University of California at Berkeley, where he won an NCAA championship in 1959. That same year, Michigan State posted a 19-4 record of its own, but that proved to be the program's high watermark in the ensuing 18 seasons, when the team's overall record was a forgettable 204 wins, 233 losses. But then, in the fall of 1977, along came Magic. At the time, the enthusiasm level in MSU's home gymnasium, Jennison Fieldhouse, was, to put it politely, restrained. When word leaked that Johnson, a hometown hero who was born and raised in Lansing, had inked with State, even after being heavily recruited by dozens of top programs across the country, including Michigan, every available season ticket package was snapped up within hours. That fall, Irvin Johnson appeared alongside Gregory Kelser and team captain Bob Chapman on the cover of the team's press guide, the first MSU basketball freshman to be bestowed with that honor. There was no such fanfare when Larry Joe Bird unpacked his duffel bag and reported to class on the Indiana State campus in September 1975. Although there had been unconfirmed rumors of him dominating AAU tournaments and embarrassing accomplished college stars, Bird's circuitous route to Terre Haute, a brief and failed attempt to matriculate at Indiana University, and a 2-week stay at Northwood Institute, left ISU fans either wary or ignorant of his talents. Not unlike Michigan State, Indiana State had grown accustomed to being a second-class sports program, dwarfed in its own region not just by Indiana University, but also by Notre Dame and Purdue. The Sycamores toiled in the unheralded Missouri Valley Conference, which was dismissed as a junior varsity league when held up against the Goliath Big Ten, of which Indiana and Purdue were members. Indiana State's first basketball team was fielded at the turn of the 20th century. In 1946, the school was known as Indiana State Teachers College, and the administration hired an earnest young man by the name of John Wooden to coach basketball and baseball and serve as the school's athletic director. Wooden's basketball teams went 47-14 in 2 seasons and were invited to the National Association of Intercollegiate Basketball tournament in 1947. Wooden refused the invitation because of the tournament's policy of not allowing African American athletes to participate. A member of Wooden's team, Clarence Walker, was black. In 1948, Wooden left what would be renamed Indiana State University to inject some life into a lackluster UCLA program. He proceeded to win 10 national championships, was crowned the Wizard of Westwood, and remains the standard by which all college coaches are measured. Indiana State, meanwhile, faded into relative obscurity. I never saw anything wrong with Indiana State, but Indiana was the school when I was growing up, Bird said. If you got recruited by IU, you had really made it. Both Bird and Magic qualified under those guidelines, since each appeared on Indiana coach Bob Knight's radar as high school seniors. Johnson still rates Knight's visit to his high school as one of the greatest thrills of his young life. Knight, who had just led Indiana to an undefeated season and a national championship, was one of the most revered and feared men in basketball, an unrelenting disciplinarian who demanded instant respect. When Johnson learned Knight was coming to Everett High School to meet with him, he woke up an hour earlier that morning, unlocked the school gym, and shot an extra 100 free throws, just in case Coach Knight asked. He was the man back then, Magic said. Knight told Magic's high school coach, George Fox, that he would meet with Johnson when school ended. Half an hour before the bell rang, Fox was walking down the hall and was stunned to see Knight leaning against the wall near Magic's classroom. "Coach, you're early," Fox said. "I always am," Knight said. "When I recruit a player, I like to see him with his peers, check out his attitude with the other students." The coach's clandestine observations of Johnson revealed a confident, outgoing kid who was clearly adored by his classmates and who patrolled the hallways of the school as the undisputed leader of the student body. When Magic sat down with Knight and Fox in Everett's cafeteria, the swagger that Knight had witnessed in the corridor quickly vanished. Johnson felt his shoulders tighten. He was nervous. The man he had seen on television pacing the Indiana sidelines was ferocious, intimidating. But when Magic tentatively extended his hand, Knight received it warmly. The Indiana coach proved to be a jocular host of the recruiting session, and within minutes set both Fox and Johnson at ease with his anecdotes describing his passion for the game. "He had a great smile," Johnson said. "I don't think I had ever seen him smile before." Knight laid out what he expected of all players who came to Bloomington. They were required to go to class and expected to graduate. He would not guarantee playing time or special treatment. "If you come," Knight told Magic, "you will be treated like everyone else. You will be expected to earn your spot. I don't give anybody anything. You have to prove to me you deserve it." The message was appealing to Johnson, who had been courted incessantly for months by schools that promised him corner lockers, starting jobs, and a few other perks, clothes, cash, cars, that were in direct violation of NCAA guidelines. It was refreshing to have someone challenge him to back up his play. Knight's tone was conciliatory until he sharply asked, "So, Irvin, where the hell are you going to school?" Both Magic and Fox were taken aback by the sudden change of tone. Coach Knight was done fooling around. There were countless kids who were dying to play for the Hoosiers. If Magic Johnson wasn't one of them, then Knight didn't want to waste his time. Johnson was silent for a moment, then conceded, "I'm not sure. I don't know about Indiana. If you started getting in my face, I'm not sure how I'd react to that." Knight cocked his head for a moment, then stood up. The interview was over. Knight shook Fox's hand and left Lansing. "That was it," Magic said. "I never spoke to or heard from him again. To tell you the truth, I regret not taking a visit. He was a tremendous coach. And just imagine, if Larry had stayed and I had gone there, the two of us would have played in college together. Now that would have been something." Unlike Magic, who was recruited heavily from his junior season on, many of Bird's suitors did not arrive until his senior year of high school. He quickly narrowed his list to Kentucky, ISU, and IU, although that did not deter other programs from pursuing him. Louisville coach Denny Crum diligently tracked Bird, even though Bird refused to visit the school. He liked Crum, though, and when he discovered the Louisville coach shooting baskets in his high school gym one afternoon, he stopped to talk with him. "Larry, we'd like for you to come on a recruiting visit," Crum said. "We really think you'll like it." "I don't want to," Bird answered plainly. "Look," Crum said, "I'll play a game of horse with you. If I beat you, you've got to come for a visit." Bird agreed to the terms and almost instantly regretted his decision. Crum was a former UCLA guard under Wooden who had maintained his soft perimeter stroke. He matched Bird basket for over 15 minutes, and the kids started to realize he had been hoodwinked. It ended like most shooting competitions Bird would compete in through the years, with his arms raised in victory. He finally eliminated Crum with a 20-foot bomb, and when Crum's last gasp rolled off the rim, Bird cheered triumphantly before noticing the agonized look on the coach's face. "It wasn't until then that I realized he was serious about the bet," Bird said. He shook Crum's hand, patted his shoulder, and said, "At least I don't have to go see your school." In truth, Bird couldn't imagine leaving his native state of Indiana, with the exception of one place. Kentucky, which happened to be Louisville's chief rival, was steeped in history, and Bird and his father had watched the Wildcats demolish some poor, overmatched opponent on television once. "Now that's a first-rate program," Joe Bird had said. When Joe B. Hall contacted Bird, Larry brought along his parents for his official visit. All three Birds sat wide-eyed in the stands of Rupp Arena and listened to the explosion of sound when the basketball team sprinted onto the court. It was easy to be swept up in the energy and the tradition that was synonymous with Kentucky basketball. When Larry glanced over at his father, he could see that Joe Bird was suitably impressed. Larry was too. His father still preferred Indiana State, and his mother was fascinated with Indiana, but Bird briefly daydreamed about what it would be like to wear Kentucky blue. The university was only 135 miles from his home. The campus was beautiful, and the athletic facilities were top-notch. Yet before he ever had a chance to give the Wildcats serious consideration, Gary Holland, his high school coach in his senior year, intercepted Bird in the hallway and informed him that Hall had concerns about him being able to get his shot off in the Southeastern Conference. "In other words, he quit recruiting me," Bird said. Although Bird's outer reaction to the news was muted, he was upset and angry. He never forgave Hall for giving up on him before he had a chance to prove himself. "I don't know if I would have gone there," Bird said. "I liked it. They ended up taking Rick Roby instead of me. He was 6'11", and they got who they wanted and went off and won a national championship, so I guess they were fine with their decision." With his choices narrowed to the two Indiana schools, Bird was swayed by the same no-nonsense talk Knight would deliver to Magic 2 years later. No shortcuts, no guarantees, and no special treatment. He was speaking the boys' language, as well as his mother's. Georgia Bird won out. Her son Larry chose IU. Since the Birds didn't have a family car, Larry's uncle, Amos Kearns, tossed Bird's lone bag into the back seat of his Ford and drove him 49 miles north to Bloomington when school began. Kearns stayed for a while, then stretched his arms and told his nephew, "Good luck, man. I'll be up to see you." Suddenly, Bird was alone. He was not well-traveled, having been content for most of his young life to stay within the confines of his county and play ball and hang with his friends. When he glanced around his dorm room, which he shared with fellow basketball recruit Jim Wisman, a wave of uneasiness overtook him. Although Wisman was by no means wealthy, when he unpacked his clothes and personal effects, Bird realized, "Man, I don't have nothing." As he walked the grounds of the Indiana campus, he couldn't help but notice the well-dressed students who looked nothing like his pals back in French Lick. Mindful that basketball always raised his comfort level, Bird showed up each night at Assembly Hall with Wisman and another IU freshman, Wayne Radford, with hopes of getting into the games with the varsity players. The newcomers rarely did. The regulars played game after game without including them. Bird and Wisman, who would later become noteworthy as the player Knight pulled off the court by his jersey on national television during one of his famous tirades in 1976, finally switched venues to the outdoor courts on campus. When word got out that there was some pretty good basketball being played there, IU varsity players Bobby Wilkes and Scott May began showing up and playing 2-on-2 with them. May, already an All-American, rained jumper after jumper over Bird, beating the young forward repeatedly with his outside touch. It was both frustrating and humiliating. Bird studied him carefully and realized that May had a knack of creating space for himself by leaning in as if to launch the shot, then stepping back ever so slightly when he finally did. He never shot beyond 16 or 17 feet and was meticulously mindful of his range. He couldn't beat people off the dribble, so he was a spot shooter, Bird said. I started thinking, if I can add that kind of shooting with the movement and the drives and the rebounding and the other stuff I'm doing, I might be pretty good. Although IU star Kent Benson pointedly ignored him during the pickup games at Assembly Hall, Bird hardly felt like an outcast. His schoolwork was difficult, but he knew once the basketball season started he'd have tutors available to assist him. The classes were large, in some cases over 100 students, but Bird minimized his initial sense of feeling overwhelmed by sitting in the front. For the most part, everything was cool, he said. I just didn't have any money. At night, if the guys wanted to go get something to eat, I had no money to do it. I couldn't buy a pair of pants or a shirt. Jimmy was pretty nice. He let me wear whatever I wanted of his. But it started to get to me, just never having any money. 2 weeks into school, Bird started to rethink his strategy. Maybe he should withdraw from IU, get a job, then try again when he had some financial security. He didn't share his concerns with any of his new friends on campus or his parents back home. The few times he called, Georgia could sense he was homesick, but she encouraged him to study hard and stick with it. Bird's interaction with Knight was minimal, particularly since the team's workouts had not yet officially begun. He occasionally bumped into Knight at the gym, but the coach was an intimidating figure, and Bird was not one to initiate a conversation. Bird might have made it, if not for the night he broke his toe during a pickup game on the outdoor courts after another player landed on his foot. The injury was painful and left Bird limping all over campus. He got up 40 minutes earlier in the morning so he'd make it to his first class on time, but was consistently late getting to the next one. I'm sitting there, saying to myself, I'm hurt. I can't work. I'm going to be in trouble for being late to class. I don't have any money, and they won't let me play in any of the games, Bird said. Time to go home. After 24 days on campus, Bird packed up his duffel bag, closed his dormitory room door, and hitchhiked back to French Lick. He did not tell anyone of his plans, not even the coach who had recruited him. When Larry walked into his house, his mother who had just finished her waitress shift, was washing dishes at the sink. "What are you doing home?" asked Georgia Bird. "I'm done. I'm not going back," her son answered. "I'm going to work." Georgia Bird's voice cracked. She was a strong, proud woman, but this news crushed her. "I thought you were going to be the first one to graduate college," she said. "This was a great opportunity for you. Don't you understand? I'm so disappointed." "Mom," Bird said, "I don't have any money. I can't do this stuff everyone else is doing. You never had any money before and you've always managed," she snapped. "But this is different," Bird said. "I can't make this work until I get a job and earn some pay." "You were going to be the first one," Georgia Bird said bitterly as she turned her back on her son. Bird's mother said nothing more. She did not speak to Larry for nearly a month and a half. Bird moved in with his grandmother, Lizzie Kearns, and avoided Georgia completely. By then, his parents were divorced, and while Joe Bird was not happy with his son's decision either, he advised him, "If you are leaving school to work, then you better get on that job, now." 10 days after he left the IU campus, Bird borrowed Amos Kearns's car, corralled his childhood friend Beezer Carnes, and drove back to Bloomington to officially withdraw from class. He did not stop in to speak with Knight, Jim Wisman, or the other guys who would have been his teammates. He simply left as quietly as he came. "I have no clue when Coach Knight even realized I was gone," Bird said. "I never heard from him. They had a great team. I'm sure he was thinking, the hell with Bird. I can't say I blame him." Word of Bird's departure from Bloomington spread quickly in the small towns of French Lick and West Baden. He had not just disappointed his family. The letdown reverberated throughout the entire community. He was pressured into briefly enrolling in Northwood Institute, but after 2 weeks of practicing with their team and finding the competition underwhelming, Bird withdrew from there as well. He took a job working for the town of French Lick, cutting trees, painting street signs, sweeping the roads, collecting garbage, and unplugging the sewers. He later worked for a company delivering mobile homes. Through it all, he continued to play basketball in pickup games, summer leagues, and AAU tournaments. Although he was no longer part of the mainstream of college basketball, recruiters kept calling. Bill Hodges, the persistent Indiana State assistant, was among the suitors. Hodges repeatedly showed up, unannounced, at Bird's home, the local laundromat, and the Villager, one of the restaurants where Georgia Bird waited on tables. One night, both Hodges and Indiana State head coach Bob King appeared at one of Bird's AAU games in Mitchell, Indiana. The opponent was an Indiana All-Star team that included future Celtics guard Jerry Seasting. Bird had put up 1,300 bales of hay that week and barely made it to the game on time. He left the fields and changed into his uniform in the car while his brother drove him 25 miles to Mitchell. When Bird arrived, King immediately guessed the source of the scratches up and down Bird's arms. "Have you been putting up hay?" King asked. "Yes, sir," Bird replied. "I bet your arms are pretty tired," King said. "I can barely lift them," Bird admitted. King was non-committal about his interest in Bird before the game, but after the supposedly exhausted forward dropped 43 points and 25 rebounds on the state of Indiana's finest players, King's approach changed considerably. "Hey, Larry," he said when the game ended, "we need to get you up to Terre Haute." Hodges arranged for Bird and Beezer's brother Kevin Carnes to make a visit to Indiana State. Mark Bird also came along, and the 3 young men worked out for the coaches in jeans and tennis sneakers. "This is how we play at home," said Bird when he refused the offer of gym shorts and basketball shoes. Bird enrolled at ISU that fall and was required to sit out the season to be eligible under NCAA guidelines. He faithfully attended practice every day, tormenting the ISU players with his arsenal of basketball weapons. The Sycamores were working on a defensive drill in which they would put 3 seconds on the clock and have their starters defend the last second shot. 6 times in a row, Bird beat the buzzer with an improbable bomb. The next day, when the starters were working on their full-court press, Bird took the ball to the middle and began shredding it. "Bird," King said, "sit down." Larry was confused. Why was his coach so angry with him? He was putting on a show out there. No team in their right mind would press them with him handling the ball. It took him several minutes on the sidelines before it dawned on him why King was so irritated. Bird was making his team look bad. He grabbed his sweats and marched out of the gym. Hodges, the assistant coach, followed after him and confirmed Bird's suspicions. "Larry," Hodges said, "you're killing their confidence. We're losing them because of it." "Well, I gotta go home and think about this," Bird replied. "I'm here to play ball. I need to play ball." Hodges explained that his presence was demoralizing to the starters, who posted a 13-12 record that season. They were intimidated by him. Bird countered that practices were his games until he was eligible and his future teammates needed to toughen up. "After that, I practiced all the time," he said. Almost a year after watching and waiting, Bird scored 31 points and grabbed 18 rebounds in his college debut against Chicago State. He was heartened to see nearly 5,000 people in the stands, especially since his teammates had forecasted a low turnout. Fan support in Terre Haute was often lackluster. It wasn't until after the game that Bird discovered why the crowd was so robust. Free furniture was being given away at halftime. The basketball climate in Terre Haute was about to change. Word of Bird's exceptional skills spread quickly. The team went 25-3 in 1976-77, his first season. "I'm a bird watcher" T-shirts sprang up all over campus. The tipping point was on November 28, 1977, when he appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated, surrounded by 2 cheerleaders whispering "shh" so as not to reveal college basketball's secret weapon. The cover transformed Bird into an overnight celebrity on the college basketball circuit. The avalanche of attention was an unwelcome development for a shy, understated country kid who preferred not to be noticed at all. "That cover changed my life," Bird said. "People were all over me. There were some days I wished I had never been on it." Magic Johnson, a freshman at Michigan State the day Bird became a cover boy, thumbed through the pages of Sports Illustrated in search of the story. He couldn't afford his own subscription, so every Thursday after practice at Michigan State, he'd run into the coach's lounge and pilfer their copy to see who was featured that week. The day Bird graced the cover, there was no accompanying feature. Larry had declined to be interviewed. Still, Magic found the brief blurb on the forward's hardscrabble life to be as eye-popping as his basketball numbers. "Are you kidding me?" he said to Heathcote. "This guy is averaging 30 points a game, but before that he took a year off and told everybody, 'I'd be okay working the rest of my life.' Then he decides, okay, well, maybe I'll play after all. Who does that?" Unbelievable. I'm telling you, man, this guy is one interesting cat. Magic identified with the pressure Bird felt to play basketball in his home state. Johnson had also narrowed his college choices to a larger, more prestigious university, Michigan, and the state school, Michigan State, preferred by his family. And like Bird, he had a multitude of other options. Maryland, Notre Dame, North Carolina State, and Indiana, to name a few. Each day, dozens of schools inundated the Johnson family with letters, phone calls, and coincidental interactions. Finally, Irvin Johnson Sr. changed the phone number. One cold winter morning, Detroit coach Dick Vitale showed up in Lansing just after 6 a.m. He knocked on the door of Magic's house and was told politely by Christine Johnson that her son had already left. He was up the street, shooting jump shots in the snow before school. It was a common occurrence for recruiters to show up at odd hours of the day or night. NCAA regulations regarding contact with a student-athlete were far more lenient then, and Magic often waited at the bus stop for school in the morning with 3 or 4 suitors. When he went to lunch at Burger King, the assistant coach from Maryland loitered in the parking lot hoping for a chance encounter with him. Johnson was particularly flattered when he was contacted by UCLA coach Larry Farmer, and he bragged to his friends about going Hollywood. But Magic soon experienced the downside of big-time recruiting. Shortly after he cleared his schedule to fly out to Los Angeles, Farmer called back and told him to hold off. The Bruins were in hot pursuit of Albert King of Fort Hamilton High School in Brooklyn, New York, who had been rated the top prep player in the country, ahead of both Magic and another top senior, Gene Banks. For the first time in his young life, Magic was relegated to second-class status. He moped around the house, cursing the Bruins, vowing to make them pay for snubbing him. When Farmer called back and tried to rekindle his relationship with Magic after King chose Maryland, the proud young point guard told him he was no longer interested in UCLA. Another West Coast school, the University of Southern California, also invited Johnson out for a visit, but at the last minute Magic decided against making the trip. There was only one problem. He neglected to tell the USC coaches about his change of heart. When the plane arrived with no Magic on it, they frantically searched for their prize recruit in the Los Angeles airport before they reached his family and were informed that he was at home on Middle Street in Lansing, eating a sandwich. Johnson visited Minnesota even though the school was on probation for recruiting violations, mostly because he was intrigued by their star, Michael Thompson. The two connected immediately. They went to a party on campus, and by the end of the evening, Johnson was surrounded by students, entertaining them with jokes and stories. "It was like he was already enrolled there," Thompson said. "He made me feel great. It was almost like he was recruiting me. When he left, I told our coaches, 'We've got him. He's coming here. We're going undefeated next year.'" 2 weeks later, Thompson was stunned to learn that while Johnson rated Minnesota as his favorite recruiting trip, he couldn't possibly go anywhere in the Big Ten except Michigan or Michigan State. Magic's mother and father favored him remaining in their hometown of Lansing, even though Michigan's campus in Ann Arbor was just 53 miles away. They weren't the only ones. Magic's teacher, Greta Dart, and her husband, Jim, who were very close to the Johnson family and had no children of their own, were also MSU alums and pushing Spartan Green. The residents of East Lansing, desperate to keep their native son in the fold, signed a petition in the spring of his senior year of high school urging him to play for Michigan State. The petition had more than 5,000 signatures. "I should have gone to Michigan," Johnson said. "It was the better basketball school and the better school academically, but it wasn't as simple as that. I had grown up around Michigan State. I had gone to all the games since I was a little boy." Johnson was genuinely torn. He liked Michigan coach Johnny Orr and his assistant Bill Frieder, who had been attentive and persuasive throughout the process. Unwilling to disappoint either school, Magic attended Saturday afternoon Michigan games wearing their trademark blue and yellow colors, then changed his sweatshirt to Spartan Green before showing up at the MSU games on Saturday nights. Just before Magic's senior year of high school, Michigan State fired head coach Gus Ganakis. His replacement was Heathcote, a gruff taskmaster who had no qualms about berating his players if they made a mistake on the floor. Just as he had been with Indiana's coach Knight, Johnson was wary of playing for such a volatile personality. Heathcote assured Magic that even though he was growing taller, he still envisioned him as a point guard who would run the offense. Johnson liked that idea. His decision was cemented once longtime MSU assistant Vernon Payne endorsed Heathcote even though Payne was moving on to Wayne State. Magic's mother was relieved that her son chose State. Christine Johnson was a Seventh-day Adventist, and her Sabbath ran from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. Had her son gone to Michigan, she would have missed all of his Saturday afternoon home games. Irvin Johnson Sr. was happy because his son would be playing right up the street, and the games wouldn't cut too much into his work hours. When Irvin Jr. announced his decision to attend Michigan State, he proclaimed at his press conference, "I was born to be a Spartan." In his first season, the freshman helped turn a program that had gone 12-15 the previous season into a 25-5 powerhouse. Magic developed remarkable chemistry with Greg Kelser, an athletic forward who could run the floor and loved to slam home Johnson's carefully lobbed alley-oop passes. The Spartans advanced all the way to the Mid-East Regional Final against Kentucky. The winner would go to the Final Four. The loser would go home. The Spartans were up by 5 points at halftime and led by 7 with 19 minutes to go. But Kentucky, playing zone, swarmed Magic, forcing him away from the basket. He picked up his fourth foul with 9:19 left and began playing cautiously. Irvin changed his demeanor, and our team changed its demeanor along with him, Heathcote said. Magic's shooting was off, 2 for 10. His passes were ineffective, 6 turnovers, and his team was in foul trouble. Michigan State ended up losing 52-49 in one of Johnson's worst games as a collegiate player. Kentucky's success stemmed in part from using Roby to set high-post screens and lure MSU into foul trouble. Johnson remained convinced that the Spartans lost because they stopped pushing the ball. As he and Kelser reviewed the film in the coach's office, they made a pact to play transition basketball on every possible possession the following season. But first, Magic planned to showcase his talents in the World Invitational Tournament, an opportunity, he felt, to show the country and Joe B. Hall that he belonged among the elite. When he looked down the roster, he was surprised and pleased to see Bird's name on the list. The Sports Illustrated cover had aroused his curiosity, and he figured he'd spend some time getting to know this Indiana State star. Bird was aware of Magic's success, but hadn't followed him closely, since Michigan State was neither in Indiana State's conference nor on their schedule. "I was more interested in what the Purdue guys were doing," he said. The one name on the roster Bird was thankful to see was James Bailey, the Rutgers star whom he had toured with the previous summer in Sofia, Bulgaria. That U.S. team was coached by Crum, Bird's old horse opponent, and they played 4 international opponents, including the Cuban national team. The U.S. team wound up in a bench-clearing melee against the Cubans, with fans spilling out of the stands and players punching and shoving each other. Bailey was attempting to extricate himself from the mob when a security guard screamed to him, "Duck!" He turned just in time to see his attacker heave a broken bottle at his head. Bailey punched the man in self-defense, but the bottle caught his elbow and ripped it open. He would require 54 stitches in all, 34 to repair the gash on his arm, and another 20 to sew up the wound on his right hand from the man's teeth. The Bulgarian police, dressed in riot gear and toting rifles, finally separated the two teams. Bird, who had ducked for cover under the scorer's table, looked over at Bailey and asked, "What happened?" Bailey, his face drained of color, was helped off the floor and taken to the hospital. Bird was so angry that he swore he'd never play in another international competition. It was a promise he did not keep. International incidents have a way of bonding teammates, and Bailey and Bird developed a close alliance. They talked sports, compared upbringings, and found they had more in common than a white kid from the country and a black kid from the city would have ever imagined. "I'd always heard Bird was kind of rough around the edges," Bailey said, "but I didn't find him that way at all. I was surprised how incredibly respectful he was of other people. Bailey and Bird met again on the court in the spring of 1978 in the NIT tournament, just weeks before the World Invitational team was assembled. Rutgers nipped Indiana State in the final seconds on a Bailey basket, and as the two players walked off the floor together, the Rutgers fans burst through the ropes and stormed the floor to celebrate their win. Amid the chaos that followed, an unruly fan charged Bird and jumped on his back. The forward shook him off with his elbow, knocked him to the ground, and kept walking. "My coach wasn't very happy with me," said Bird, "but what was I supposed to do? The guy was hanging on my back." If Hall was aware of Bird's little incident that spring, he never mentioned it. In fact, he didn't say much to Bird, Magic, or any of the other non-Kentucky players at all. "I've never had a coach completely ignore me before," Magic said. Joe B. Hall was the first. Roby, one of the Kentucky chosen few, sensed the disconnect between his coach and the rest of the players. He befriended Bird and showed him the lodge where the Kentucky players stayed on campus during the school year. The accommodations were luxurious, complete with separate rooms and bathrooms for each player, a designated dining area with a cook, and a sitting area called the Wild Coyote Lounge, which had plush sofas, television sets, and pinball machines. The lavish perks were later deemed an NCAA violation because they created an uneven playing field for recruiting, but it was clear to Bird that the Kentucky players were used to having the best. Roby, who a year later became Bird's closest friend in the NBA, was funny, generous, and outgoing. He was difficult to dislike, but it was the situation that irked Bird, not the people involved. He objected to the way Hall doted on the Kentucky players and overlooked the others. "We were kind of separate from the rest of the group," Roby acknowledged. "I'm sure there were better players than the Kentucky guys, but Joe already knew we could play together." Because Magic was only 18, his body hadn't filled out yet. He was the youngest member of the World Invitational team, but he felt certain that once Hall spent some time with him, he'd fall in love with his game and put him in the starting lineup where he belonged. The first 2 days of practice, Johnson dominated Macy, forcing turnovers, taking him to the basket, and running past him in the open floor. Yet when the team played Cuba in its opening game on April 5th in the Omni, the starting lineup was Kentucky across the board. I'm thinking, "Well, wait a minute," Magic said. Sidney Moncrief was sitting next to me on one side. James Bailey was sitting next to me on the other. Larry Bird was sitting next to James. Larry said, "Forget about it. He's going with his own guys." But when we scrimmaged at night, we were blowing his guys off the floor. We embarrassed them. Macy and Roby and them couldn't keep up with us, and this was happening every time, not just once in a while. The United States trounced the Cubans, who had only 2 players who were 6'6" or taller. Bird grabbed 7 rebounds in 14 minutes of playing time, while Magic contributed 4 points and 3 assists in 13 minutes of a 109-64 win. News accounts of the game failed to mention either player. In fact, much of the ink was devoted to describing the spectacular pregame warm-up dunks of James Bailey, Sidney Moncrief, and Louisville star Darrell Griffith, who was also on the team. In the first few hours he practiced with Magic and Larry, Moncrief recognized their exceptional court sense. Their pass-first, shoot-later approach was refreshing and needed with a lineup of scorers who weren't used to sharing the ball. "They were both so unselfish," said Moncrief. "It was a little unusual." After their first win, the team was walking up the staircase to exit the arena when they spotted Celtics general manager Red Auerbach descending on the other side. "Hey, look, it's Red Auerbach," said O'Corin, nudging Bird. "Who?" Bird asked. After the opening game, Hall settled on a starting quintet of Givens, Macy, Roby, Moncrief, and Bailey. The Americans squeaked past Yugoslavia, the runner-up to the United States in the 1976 Olympic Games, 88-83. Although Kentuckians Macy and Lee were credited the following morning with helping the team pull away, it was the Indiana State forward who rattled in a 16-footer with 5.5 minutes left to tie the game 72-72. Magic played 11 minutes in the game and tallied just 1 assist. He was pressing, trying too hard to impress in the short minutes he was given. "You could see he was frustrated," Bird said. "I don't blame him. It was a joke. Kyle Macy over Magic? Come on." "It was crystal clear what was going on," Bailey said. "We just couldn't understand how Joby Hall could play those Kentucky guys when he had all this better talent in front of him, especially Magic and Larry. It was unfair, but if those two guys were disappointed, they never showed it." During one practice, when the starters were drilling on how to break the press, Bird and Magic instituted what Bird called the rat trap, forcing the ball handler to his opposite hand, then as soon as he spun, bringing another player up and making the dribbler try to throw the ball over the top. "Nobody told us to do it," Bird said. "We just did. We were stealing the ball and scoring on them like crazy. Then, all of a sudden, Hall just blew the whistle and stopped the drill. He was mad. Next thing you know, we're on to something else. He didn't seem very happy with us." In their final game against the Soviets, which the Americans won handily 102-87, Bird and Magic brought the fans out of their seats with their sizzling back-and-forth exchange. It was a snippet of brilliance, at least half of which Hall publicly acknowledged when the tournament was over. Pressed on how he chose his starting quintet of Macy, Roby, Givens, Moncrief, and Bailey over the talent he had on his roster, Hall said, "We felt that was our best unit, but today Magic came in with his road show, and he blew them out of the press. He's a sensational player and real fine young man." Moncrief and Givens were named to the All-Tournament team, while two Kentucky boys, Roby, 20 minutes, and Macy, 18.7 minutes, were among the team leaders in minutes played. Bird and Magic left content. They had made their mark in the privacy of the workout sessions. "It's too bad we didn't play more," said Magic. "We were the crowd favorites. I'm not sure people had ever seen players like Larry and me." Although they generated a large measure of respect for each other, the two players departed without having a single meaningful conversation. They arrived as strangers and left as mere acquaintances. 11 months later they met again, with the NCAA National Championship and their college legacy on the line.
This is the end of disc number 1. Please insert disc number 2. This is disc number 2.
"It's too bad we didn't play more," said Magic. "We were the crowd favorites. I'm not sure people had ever seen players like Larry and me." Although they generated a large measure of respect for each other, the two players departed without having a single meaningful conversation. They arrived as strangers and left as mere acquaintances. 11 months later they met again, with the NCAA National Championship and their college legacy on the line. Chapter 2. March 25th, 1979, Salt Lake City, Utah. The door to the gymnasium creaked open, unleashing a rush of disquieting noises. First, it was a burst of boisterous laughter, then a thunderous commotion of bodies clomping toward the entrance. Magic Johnson and his Michigan State teammates turned in unison to see who dared to interrupt Coach Judd Heathcote in mid-sentence, in mid-strategy, as he reviewed his team's defensive assignments for the final time in preparation for their NCAA basketball championship game. The Spartans were down at the far end of the gym, huddled around their coach and a full-court heave away from the distractions that had punctuated their session. Yet even from that distance, the interlopers were unmistakable. The Indiana State basketball team, clad in jeans, boots, and 10-gallon cowboy hats. The first person Magic looked for was their star, Larry Bird. He was amazed to see him standing there, his hat slightly askew. Indiana State was scheduled to hold a shoot-around immediately following Michigan State's workout, but the allotted time for the Spartans had not yet expired. The ISU players knew that, but guard Carl Nix said, "Let's go in there and watch practice and flaunt our stuff. Let's let them know we're here." There was an instant when the two basketball teams, one day away from playing in the most widely anticipated college title game ever, simply stood frozen in place and studied one another in silence. Yet that moment was swiftly obliterated by the screeches of Heathcote once he checked his wristwatch and realized the Sycamores were encroaching on his precious practice time. "We still have 20 minutes. You aren't supposed to be in here. Get out of my practice," Heathcote howled. As quickly as they materialized, Bird and his boys disappeared, slamming the door demonstratively behind them. Magic was alternately stunned and amused by Indiana State's behavior, but Heathcote seethed for 10 minutes after the Sycamores left, teeth clenched and spittle flying. "They don't respect you," Heathcote roared. "They are trying to distract you. No one interrupts our practice. Do you see what they are trying to do?" Heathcote, who had been motivating college athletes for 15 years, recognized an opportunity when he saw one. He harped on Indiana State's antics until his players were sufficiently insulted and agitated. The Spartans ran into the Sycamores one more time in the hallway as they departed. A handful of the ISU players chanted and sang the team's fight song as they passed. "I'm not sure what they were trying to do," said Michigan State forward Greg Kelser, "but it was awful disrespectful." As the Spartans filed onto the bus to return to the team hotel, the talk again turned to Indiana State's curious choice of attire. "It just doesn't fit," Magic said to Kelser. "I didn't know they were cowboys. You just don't see that kind of thing in college. Just what are those country guys trying to pull?" The 1979 NCAA championship game between Michigan State and Indiana State drew a 24.1 Nielsen rating, the highest in college basketball history, a noteworthy milestone that remained untouched 3 decades later. It was the matchup every college basketball fan longed to see, not because the two schools had demonstrated a long history of success or a simmering adversarial rivalry, but because of a more singular concept. Magic versus Bird, two prolific stars who led their teams with the perfect blend of superb passing, nerveless shooting, and above all, a steely ability to withstand the mounting pressure that dogged each of them as their resumes swelled with success. Their paths to the championship game in Salt Lake had not been nearly as smooth as their stellar records would indicate. Indiana State's unblemished 33-0 mark suggested a perfect season, yet it did not reflect the volatility that swirled around Bird, a demanding young player who would not tolerate anyone who failed to consistently submit the proper effort. It was of little consequence to Bird whether he was popular with his teammates. What he wanted, expected from them, was to match his intensity, and that was often a tall order. "Larry would fight you," said Nix. "He wouldn't back down. If he didn't like what you were doing, he was in your face, telling you." Indiana State forward Leroy Staley learned that firsthand in preseason when he committed some sloppy turnovers and Bird began chiding him to pick up his game. Staley took out his frustration on seldom-used backup point guard Rod McNally, cornering him as he brought the ball up the floor and kneeing him as he swiped at the ball. As McNeely crumpled to the ground, Bird charged Staley, fists curled. "Leroy was frustrated, I think," Nick said. "He wasn't playing well, and he got too rough. But Larry wasn't going to let him get away with a cheap shot like that." "I really don't know what happened," Staley said. "Larry was having a bad day. Next thing I know, he was swinging at me." The two were eventually separated, but not before 3 Sycamores hauled Bird away. Nobody approached Bird after the altercation. They understood it was wise to let their volatile leader cool off on his own. Coach Bill Hodges called Bird and Staley in to clear the air, and both players agreed to move forward. When Larry returned, he was unapologetic and as steely-eyed as ever. "We had a lot of skirmishes that year," Nick said. "Every day in our practice was a dogfight." Bird's mantra was simple: play the game the right way or stay away. In his mind, the previous season had been squandered by a lack of discipline, and he wasn't going to allow that to happen again. "Leroy Staley is a great guy," Bird said. "He was also a good player and a good teammate who helped us a great deal, but you needed to stay on him, and he wasn't the only one. I didn't mind doing it. Those guys were intimidated by me. It was my job as the leader of the team to keep their intensity level up, even in practice. I knew that was the only way we could win a championship." Bird was keenly aware of the inordinate publicity he received and stopped talking to the press in hopes that the media would promote other Sycamore players. Even so, he still had to contend with the perceived slights of his teammates, who grew tired of it all being about number 33. There was a lot of jealousy. Still is to this day, Bird said. Indiana State was projected to finish in the middle of the pack in 1978-79 when head coach Bob King suffered a heart attack and brain aneurysm and was replaced by assistant Bill Hodges. Up until that point, Staley, who had clashed with King, was planning to transfer to Florida State to play for Coach Hugh Durham. Once Hodges received the promotion, Staley decided to stick around. Transfers Nix, Bobby Heaton, and Alex Gilbert brought new life and a fresh approach to the team and quickly became key components of the Sycamore's nucleus. Nix was a cocky guard from Chicago who went hard to the basket and wasn't afraid to take on anyone, defensively or offensively. Heaton, Indiana State's sixth man, was a savvy player with good court sense and a perimeter shot that would prove to be pivotal during ISU's remarkable run. Gilbert was a rebounder and shot blocker who possessed incredible leaping ability. The other starters included defensive stopper Brad Miley and point guard Steve Reed, an inexperienced yet unselfish player who had great range but was a hesitant shooter. The Sycamore's bench was short. The only other player besides Heaton who played significant minutes was Staley. The limited rotation earned the Sycamore regulars the nickname the Magnificent Seven. And when a local car dealership featured them in one of their advertisements wearing blue cowboy hats, jeans, and boots, it became their signature look. In the second game of the season, Bird led ISU to a 63-55 upset over Purdue, burning the Boilermakers for 22 points and 15 rebounds. 5 days later, he dropped 40 points on Evansville, and then, on December 16th, he punished Butler with 48 points, 19 rebounds, and 5 assists. It was a remarkable string of basketball, and Hodges, only 36 years old, drew great comfort from Bird's decision to play for ISU in his final season rather than bolt to the NBA. Hodges knew he was watching a once-in-a-lifetime player at work. The previous spring, Bird had become junior eligible for the NBA draft. Since Bird's career technically began in 1974 when he spent 3.5 weeks at Indiana, he was considered a member of the class of 1978 in the eyes of professional basketball, even though he had never played a second for the Hoosiers and still had a year of eligibility left at Indiana State. Under new guidelines of the NBA's collective bargaining agreement in 1976, a player could be drafted, return to college, and play his final season, and then negotiate with the NBA team that had selected him. If an agreement was not reached by draft day, the team would forfeit its exclusive rights and the player would go back into the NBA draft pool. Bird was unaware of the rules that had so direct an impact on him. In fact, he was blissfully ignorant of almost everything that had to do with the NBA. "I just didn't care about the pros," Bird said. The Indiana Pacers held the number 1 pick in 1978, and their coach, Bob "Slick" Leonard, called Bird and invited him to Indianapolis for a visit to discuss his future. Bird drove to meet Leonard with Ed Jukes, a local banker and trusted family friend. The meeting was held in downtown Indianapolis at the Hyatt Regency. As they walked into the hotel, Bird was struck by the long escalator that led to the second floor. "It was the first time I had ever seen one," he said. As they got situated in the hotel restaurant, Leonard asked Bird if he'd like a beer. "Sure," Bird answered. "I'll have a Heineken." Leonard gulped. He was a Terre Haute native and had grown up, as he liked to say, walking the same dirt floors as Larry did. Yet even after becoming a professional player and NBA executive, Slick still drank Champagne Velvet beer, the locally brewed ale that was popular because it was inexpensive. On Friday nights, it was Pabst Blue Ribbon, because we were probably going to drink a lot of them, and that was the economical way to go, Leonard said. Only wealthy people drank Heineken. But I figured, what the hell? I had one with him. Leonard explained the dire situation of the Pacers franchise, which had recently merged with the NBA, along with the other teams in the American Basketball Association, ABA, and was on the verge of financial ruin. The team had offered its top free agent, Dan Roundfield, a $200,000 contract, which was $200,000 we didn't have, Leonard said. But the Atlanta Hawks swooped in and offered Roundfield $450,000. Roundfield went for the bigger dollars and left the Pacers with a gaping hole in their lineup, as well as a difficult predicament to consider. Indiana wanted to draft Bird, but the franchise couldn't risk him going back to Indiana State for his senior season. They needed help immediately. "Look, I can't wait a year," Slick told Bird. "Our franchise can't afford it. So, if you are going back to school, you've got to tell me, because I'll trade the pick. But if you come out, I'll take you." There was no hesitation in Bird's reply. He had promised his mother Georgia he would leave Indiana State with a degree. Although Georgia's financial situation was still tenuous, she remained steadfast in insisting that her son earn that diploma. "My mom didn't care about the money," Bird explained. "She was hanging in there. It wasn't a life-or-death situation. If it was, maybe I would have made a different decision." Leonard and Bird drained a couple more Heinekens before they amicably shook hands and parted ways. As he was leaving the Hyatt, Bird asked Jukes to hold on a moment. He hopped on the escalator, riding up, then down again, with childish delight. Although he was disappointed that Bird would not be wearing a Pacers uniform, Slick was hardly devastated. At that time, there were questions about Bird's body type, his quickness, and his temperament. No one was projecting him to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. "I liked Larry," Leonard said, "but come on now. Nobody knew he was that good." True to his word, Leonard dealt the number 1 pick to the Portland Trail Blazers in exchange for guard Johnny Davis, center Clement Johnson, and the number 3 pick in the 1978 draft, which the Pacers used to select Kentucky big man Rick Roby. Now it was the Trailblazers' turn to woo the reluctant ISU forward. Bird was barraged with phone calls at his French Lick home from Portland executive Stu Inman. After a while, Georgia Bird, able to distinguish Inman's voice, would politely but firmly hang up the phone. Inman's sales pitch to Bird included the prospect of playing alongside a certain future Hall of Famer. "Larry," Inman said, "you are missing out on an opportunity to play with Bill Walton. He is one of the greatest centers ever to play the game." "He's hurt all the time," Bird bluntly replied. Although Bird, who would later play alongside Walton with the Celtics during their 1986 championship season, counts Walton among his closest friends, he was accurate in his assessment. In Walton's first 2 seasons in the league, he broke his nose, wrist, and leg. After leading Portland to an NBA championship in the 1977 season, Walton broke his foot in 1978, played in just 58 games, and demanded a trade during the offseason because of what he perceived to be unethical treatment from the team doctors. When the Blazers refused to deal him, the Big Redhead sat out the entire 1978-79 season in protest. The broken foot led to a myriad of problems that severely hampered his career and later required him to undergo fusion surgery on his ankle. Although Bird was as adamant with the Blazers about his intentions to return to Indiana State, Portland remained undeterred, emptying its Rolodex in attempts to reach out to numerous contacts to whisper in Larry's ear. "I swear Portland had everyone working it," Bird said. "Total strangers would come up to me and say, 'I can't believe you're not going to the pros. You have a chance to take care of your family for life. Why do you need to go to school?' I kept telling them, 'No, I'm going back. I'm going back.' I wasn't changing my mind." Inman made some inquiries about Bird and discovered he was fiercely loyal, uncommonly stubborn, and had a quick temper and a taste for beer. Inman had concerns about the forward's maturity and conditioning. On draft day, Portland selected Minnesota forward Michael Thompson with the first overall pick. The Blazers' intent was to pluck Bird with their other first-round selection, the 7th pick, but Boston, selecting 6th, grabbed him before Portland had the chance. Red Auerbach made the selection without ever speaking to Bird about his professional aspirations. The Celtics general manager already knew all about Indiana State's prized player. The day Larry's World Invitational Tournament teammates saw Red walking down the stairs, he was there to evaluate Bird. He had also been monitoring Bird through reports from scouts John Killalay and Casey Jones. Killalay returned home from an extended road trip to the Midwest and gushed to Auerbach, "Red, I think I've just found the next Rick Barry. He can shoot from anywhere, and you won't believe what a great passer this kid is." "I trusted Killalay," said Auerbach, "but I also thought he was exaggerating." Auerbach placed a call to his friend Bob Knight, who assured him that Bird's missteps in Bloomington were nothing to be concerned about. "In fact," Auerbach reported, "Bob told me he wished he had helped the kid along more. The way he put it was, the only thing Bird did wrong here was not check with me before he left campus." On a balmy afternoon in June, Bird was playing golf in Santa Claus, Indiana, with his longtime friend Max Gibson, when a stranger hollered to them, "Larry Bird, you just got drafted by the Boston Celtics." "What does that mean?" Bird asked. "Hell, I don't know," he said. Gibson and Bird plopped down their clubs and walked inside the lounge to have a sandwich. At around 4 p.m., they drove to the house where they were staying and turned on the television. Back then, without the benefit of 24-hour news scrolls, internet access, and multiple ESPN channels, there was no other way to learn about the happenings of the day than to watch the 6 o'clock news. Bird and Gibson sat around talking about fishing, golf, and hunting until the NBA report finally aired. The forward listened, shrugged, then shut off the TV set. The magnitude of what Auerbach had done was lost on him. "Max was a lot more excited about it than I was," Bird said. Throughout Bird's senior season at Indiana State, members of the Celtics began appearing at the Holman Center, often without warning. Casey Jones, Coach Tommy Heinsohn, Celtics star Dave Cowens, and even Auerbach himself intermittently appeared to check on their investment. In the meantime, scouts from nearly every NBA team were also traversing the country with a Michigan State schedule in their pockets. They, too, had number 33 circled, Magic's college number with the Spartans. Johnson had already carefully mapped out his future basketball plans in his head. If all went well, he intended to turn pro after his sophomore season, and NBA executives knew it. In fact, Magic had nearly made the jump after his freshman year, even going so far as to meet with the Kansas City Kings. But the two parties couldn't agree on a suitable salary, and Johnson went back to Michigan State, where he planned to cement his standing as a top draft pick. In contrast to Bird, Johnson was a student of the pro game and had emulated his idols Wilt Chamberlain, Dave Bing, and Julius Erving on the playgrounds of Lansing. Since he nearly always outlasted his friends who grew tired of shooting or were called home to supper, Johnson often played one-on-one games with himself, counting his first crossover and jump shot as 2 points for Wilt, and then his post move as 2 for Bill Russell. "I wanted to play in the NBA in the worst way," Johnson said. But first, Magic wanted to win a college championship, and he was convinced that 1978-79 would be the year. Most of the nucleus of the MSU team that had advanced to the regional finals were back, including the reliable Terry Donnelly, whose timely shooting figured prominently in their postseason run, scorer Jay Vincent, and the rugged Ron Bobo Charles, who gladly handled the dirty work up front. Kelser was a senior, an explosive and gifted athlete who had meshed beautifully with Magic's game. Heathcote was also excited about a highly touted freshman from Buchanan, Michigan named Gerald Busby, who he felt could be a regular contributor before the year was out. Gerald had Jordan-like jumping ability, said Magic. We had him marked down as a surefire NBA player. Johnson was alone, practicing perimeter jump shots in an empty Jennison Fieldhouse during the first week of September 1978, when Heathcote waved him over to tell him Sports Illustrated had chosen him to appear on the cover of its college basketball preview issue. There would be no cheerleaders alongside him promoting college's best-kept secret. The word was already out on Magic. For the cover photo of the November 27, 1978 issue, he donned a black tuxedo and top hat with a white vest and patent leather shoes. In the photograph, Magic is leaping through the air, laying the ball in, wearing both the tuxedo and his trademark smile. The heading declares, Super Softs, and the tagline reads, Michigan State's Classy Irvin Johnson. Magic was so anxious to see the cover that he didn't wait to swipe it from the coach's lounge. He called his father, Irvin Johnson Sr., and told him to scoop up 10 copies at the newsstand instead. When Irvin Sr. went downtown to buy the magazine, the racks were empty. The good people of Lansing had bought them all up. When Magic went home for his annual dentist's appointment, the receptionist lamented that someone had lifted their copy too. That was one special day in the Johnson home, said Magic's father. For a young black man from Lansing, Michigan, to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, I told my wife, now I have seen everything. Just as it had done for Bird, Johnson's cover shot raised his already considerable profile to new heights. Opposing fans from various Big Ten cities lined up, Sharpie pen and Sports Illustrated cover in hand, seeking his signature. Magic almost always obliged. 9 times out of 10, whether he was in Columbus, Ohio or Minneapolis, he'd sign the magazine, receive a heartfelt thank you, then absorb a raucous Go Buckeyes or Gophers rule as he turned to walk away. Back in Terre Haute, someone showed Bird the glitzy cover with Magic decked out in formal attire. Good, was Bird's reaction. Let someone else deal with all the attention. Michigan State's first true measuring stick was a preseason exhibition game against the Russian national team, which was touring the United States and playing select colleges. The Soviets were a methodical team that simply could not keep pace with Johnson and Kelser. Michigan State ran them off the floor 76-60, barraging them with repeated fast break baskets. The game, televised nationally on HBO, drew some interested observers. The Indiana State Sycamores, who gathered at Bird and Bob Heaton's off-campus house to watch the game. ISU was scheduled to play the Russians the following week, and while Bird tried to focus on the Soviets, he couldn't help but be dazzled by what Irvin Magic Johnson had done to them. At that point, I knew very little about Magic, Bird said, but I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Magic ran those guys like a pro team. Any miss, and they'd be off running the break. His angles on his passes were perfect. He looked kind of awkward bringing the ball up with that big body, but he was always one step ahead of everyone. When Magic and Michigan State had completed their thrashing of the Russians, Bird turned to his teammates and said, "Boys, you are watching the best team in the country." Bird began the evening sitting next to Nix on a sagging couch and bragging about how he was going to dominate the Soviets. He pointed to one Russian forward and explained in explicit detail how he was going to embarrass him in the post. He pointed to another and promised to rain jump shots on his head. "There ain't nobody out there that can guard me," he boasted. "That's what he started out saying," said Nix. But by the end he was saying, "That Magic, he's incredible." Bird backed up his bravado on November 20th as ISU stunned the Soviets 83-79 behind 22 points and 13 rebounds from their forward. Thus, Indiana State became one of just 4 colleges that beat the Russians. Both Michigan State and Indiana State utilized their victories over the Soviets as a springboard to their regular season before departing for opposite corners of the country. The Sycamores flew to DeLand, Florida, where they easily dispatched East Carolina, 102-79, and Cleveland State, 102-71, to win the Hatter Classic. At that juncture, Indiana State was 6-0, but Bird, the architect of the win streak, who averaged over 31 points and 13.6 rebounds during that stretch, still wasn't impressed. "We were winning, but we really hadn't played anybody yet," Bird explained. For its Christmas tournament on December 18th, Michigan State flew west to Portland, Oregon, where they were scheduled to play Washington State, Heathcote's alma mater. The Wazoos were ranked 10th in the country and led by Don Collins, who later played for the Washington Bullets in the NBA. The normally effusive Heathcote was strangely closed-mouthed in the days leading up to the game against his beloved school, where he had also worked as an assistant coach for 7 seasons. "Like a bulldog, he was so tight," Magic said. "I could tell the game meant a lot to him. He had all of his old friends in the stands watching." The day before the game, Magic called a players-only meeting and explained the significance of the matchup to Heathcote. "We can't let him down," Magic told them. Michigan State trounced Washington State by 46 points. As they walked off the court, Magic nudged Heathcote with his elbow. "Coach, that one was for you," he said. The next day, just before Michigan State tipped off against Oregon State, Indiana coach Bob Knight, whose team had just beaten Oregon, shook Heathcote's hand and said, "Come on now, Judd, make it an all-Big Ten final." Michigan State dispatched Oregon State by 8, then spanked Indiana 74-57 in the championship. Magic submitted 20 points and 7 assists against the Hoosiers. The Spartan players were euphoric about their performance, but also anxious to return home to ring in the new year with friends and family. On December 30th, they boarded a flight to Seattle that was supposed to connect them to a flight back home to Michigan, but a blinding snowstorm diverted them to Denver. There, with his team gathered around the baggage carousel, Heathcote received the official word. The new college rankings listed Michigan State as the #1 team in the country. The newly minted team made it as far as Minneapolis the following day before inclement weather again left them stuck in a hotel, rinsing out socks and underwear on New Year's Eve. By the time they finally landed in Detroit 2 days later, on January 2nd, the players were tired, cranky, and irritated. The wait for their bags was interminable. 10, then 20 minutes passed. Heathcote approached an airline representative, demanding that their luggage be brought out to them. Another 10 minutes passed. There was steam coming out of his ears, Magic said. Finally, Heathcote could wait no longer. He climbed onto the conveyor belt and rode down the chute after the luggage. Minutes later, he was escorted through a side door with a security guard on either arm as his players convulsed with laughter. "I get very impatient when I'm traveling," Heathcote said. When the Spartans finally did return to Lansing, they had not practiced for a week. Although the team rallied to beat their next 2 opponents, they went on to drop 4 of the next 6 games, including a blowout loss to lowly Northwestern on February 3rd. That defeat dropped Michigan State to 4-4 in the Big Ten. The #1 ranking was a distant memory, and so was the jubilation of their Far West Classic championship. Heathcote called a team meeting and chastised his players for not submitting a solid defensive effort, not working hard enough on the glass, and failing to play with the proper concentration. Then it was the players' turn to sound off. Kelser went first. "Our mistakes are exacerbated by your tirades," Kelser told Heathcote. "You need to back off. You are also relying on Irvin too much. It's made us too predictable." One by one, the players weighed in. Vincent said he was playing tentatively because he was afraid if he made a mistake he'd get yanked off the court. Magic told Heathcote he felt stifled with the offense they were running. "Coach," Magic implored Heathcote, "let me take the ball and go." The coaches and players had reached a stalemate. Heathcote and his staff wanted better fundamentals and a more consistent commitment. His players wanted more freedom and less harassment. Reserve John Longacre, a Rhodes Scholar who rarely played key minutes but was respected by his teammates for his high basketball IQ, stood up and declared, "We're not playing Michigan State basketball. What happened to all that confidence we had earlier in the year? Irvin, what happened to all that cockiness you had that kept us going?" He was right, Magic admitted. We weren't playing with the same swagger. "I was glad John said something," Heathcote said, "because he was one of the only guys Irvin would listen to." Longacre, who went on to become a physician at Stanford Medical School, spoke plainly to Johnson about his academic deficiencies and the need for him to apply the same self-discipline he exhibited in his workouts to his studies. He taught Johnson how to organize his assignments and budget his time. Longacre was one of the few players who wasn't afraid to challenge Johnson. During that team meeting, he implored Johnson to stop pointing fingers and look at himself. After each player aired his concerns, Heathcote pledged to provide his point guard with more leeway and agreed to make a concerted effort to scream a little less. The meeting adjourned without properly addressing one more unspoken issue. Although the Spartans were a close team, there were occasions when Magic's gigantic personality became all-encompassing. That was occasionally bothersome to Kelser, who was the team's leading scorer and rebounder, but who was clearly overshadowed by his dynamic teammate. The truth is, we had 2 superstars, Magic and Kelser, but Magic was getting all the ink, Heathcote said. Irvin understood it was a problem, but it was just his personality. He couldn't help that everyone loved him. He was such an easy guy to gravitate towards, and sometimes that was difficult for his teammates. Kelser rarely vocalized his frustrations. He and Johnson were great friends, and spent many nights dancing at the clubs in Lansing together. Yet Heathcote detected hints of Kelser's mindset in the locker room. Greg was always into his stats, Heathcote said. We'd pass the sheet out after the game, and Irvin wouldn't even look at it, but Greg would devour that thing. He'd say, "They've only got me down for 6 rebounds. I thought I had more, didn't you?" In 2006, Kelser published a book in which he detailed his memories of Michigan State's championship season. Included was a passage in which he discussed watching Magic score 20 points one night and becoming determined to score 25 himself the next time out so that Johnson wouldn't outshine him. There was jealousy, Magic said. I didn't see it at the time, but I had stolen a lot of Greg's thunder. I didn't mean to. I didn't care about anything but winning. His comments in that book surprised me. He said I took away some of his glory. I was taken aback by that. It was kind of disappointing. Kelser insists that he recognized Magic provided him with exposure he might not have ever received had he played without him, and never meant to imply he wasn't grateful to his former teammate. I had no problem taking a back seat to Irvin, Kelser said, but I did want to be recognized for what I accomplished. When our team was billed as Magic Johnson and the Michigan State Spartans, I didn't appreciate that. But what was I going to do? The now famous Spartans team meeting is often cited as a catalyst to the team's turnaround. Yet Heathcote believed that his decision to remove Ron Charles from the starting lineup and replace him with the smaller, quicker Mike Berkovich, who was a better shooter, had as much to do with the resurgence of his team as anything. Teams have begun to recognize how damaging it was to allow Magic to grab the rebound off a miss and start the break himself. They adjusted by assigning a player to him with one specific goal in mind: block him out. Berkovich provided another outlet pass and ball handler to facilitate the transition game. Heathcote also intended to make another change, to send Terry Donnelly to the bench and insert the freshman Busby into the starting lineup. But before Heathcote could promote him, Busby abruptly quit the team. He was homesick, bothered by his coach's gruff demeanor and his constant use of profanity. Busby decided a change of scenery was in order. He transferred to Ferris State and performed well there, but Busby never came remotely close to winning a national championship or making his projected jump to the pros. I'll always wonder what Gerald Busby was thinking, Magic admitted. After the meeting and the lineup change, the Spartans ripped off wins in 10 of their final 11 games. The lone loss down the stretch came when Wisconsin's Wes Matthews, who would later become Magic's NBA teammate for the 1987-88 championship in Los Angeles, connected on a wild last-second bank shot at the buzzer in the season finale, 82-80. Initially, the last-second defeat stung the Spartans, who truly believed they were not going to lose another game. Kelser remembers that his teammates were uncommonly deflated before Magic started to work the room, pounding backs and whacking shoulders. "It's okay. Their season is over," Johnson told them. "We still have business to take care of." Knocking off Indiana State was at the top of their list. Bird's team was the number 1 overall seed in the field of 40, an astounding transformation for a school that had averaged less than 3,000 fans a game before he arrived. Indiana State knew its fortunes had changed when the students who used to play on the courts after practice began showing up earlier and earlier. After a while, the number of people watching them work out had swelled to over 100, and Hodges was forced to close practice. That did not deter the gym rats from showing up anyway. "I'd look through the windows on the gym doors, and you could see all these heads jostling to get a look," said Dr. Bob Benke, the team trainer. By the end of the season, fans were lining up outside the Holman Center at 3:30 p.m. for a 7:30 game. Since the student section did not have assigned seats, when the doors opened at 6 o'clock, there was a mad rush for the open spots. The fans were allowed into the gym in the middle level of a 3-tier building. Bird and his teammates would stand in the tunnel on the first level and watch as their fellow students stampeded one another to get a better view of their beloved basketball team. More often than not, the effort was worth it. Early in the season, in a 2-point game against Illinois State, Hodges called a timeout in the final seconds with the score tied and Indiana State in possession of the ball. Benke remembered watching Hodges draw up an elaborate play on his chalkboard that involved double screens and back picks. Nix was assigned the task of inbounding the ball. As he and Bird walked out of the huddle and toward the court, Benke heard Bird say to his friend, "Hey, Carl, just get it to me." "So I did," Nix said, "and you know what happened. Larry scored to win it." The most titillating victory of the year, however, featured Bird in a supporting role. By February 1st, 1979, Indiana State had won 18 in a row, but in a game with New Mexico State, they were trailing by 2 points with 3 seconds to play. The Aggies' Greg Webb was at the line while Bird and Nix were stuck on the bench, having fouled out of the game. Hodges called timeout, reminded his players to stay level-headed, then went about divvying up responsibilities for the final seconds. Heaton, who was in the game, waited for his assignment, but in all the confusion Hodges had neglected to tell him where to go. As each team broke from their huddle, the partisan New Mexico State crowd leaped to its feet, bellowing, 18-1! 18-1! Slab Jones, their star, sauntered past the Indiana State bench, ribbing Bird and Nix. "Too bad your streak is over." Heaton, unsure of where to go, hustled underneath the team's basket, then realized he was too deep and would have no time to shoot even if he did get the ball. He migrated to half court and waited. Webb's free throw clanged short. ISU's Brad Miley controlled the rebound and quickly relayed it to Heaton. The player Bird affectionately called Heater didn't hesitate. He hoisted a 50-foot bomb just before the buzzer sounded. "I thought it was going clear over the backboard," Heaton said. Heaton groaned. The ball started its descent and, incredibly, banked in. The shot pulled the plug on the New Mexico State celebration. Indiana State had improbably forced overtime, then went on to win in the extra frame. When New Mexico State scored their first basket of the overtime, no one even clapped, Heaton observed. They were done. Bird was elated for Heaton, a grinder with limited speed who compensated for it by making good decisions on the floor. It was also encouraging to see reserve Rich Nemchek make a couple of meaningful plays in a game of that magnitude. When Heater hit that shot, I thought, maybe this year really is different, Bird admitted. I saw something from our bench that night I hadn't seen all year. They played with confidence. They played like they were supposed to win. 9 days after that thriller, Bird endured the only outing in his college career in which he scored in single digits. The opponent was Bradley, and Bird checked out with 4 points and 11 rebounds, but Indiana State rolled 91-72 behind 31 points from Nix and 30 from Steve Reed. In defeat, Bradley coach Dick Versace declared afterward that his birdcage defense had been a success. "He actually took credit for stopping me," Bird said. "That was funny to me. I didn't even try to score. I took 2 shots. They triple-teamed me the whole game by putting a guy in front of me, a guy behind me, and another one digging for the ball. We had players on the floor that weren't even being guarded." It was a heady time for Indiana State. As the team's winning streak extended, so did the publicity surrounding their team. Bird was a campus celebrity, and not all of his teammates were comfortable with that. "Guys were getting their due, but they thought they should have gotten more, I guess," Bird said. "I think some of them got so big in their mind they thought they could probably do it without me." "It was all about Larry," Nick said. "I used to get disappointed a lot. Larry always tried to pull me in. I tried not to sulk, but there were times it was just so unfair. I was a valuable member of the team, but you wondered if anyone noticed. The more attention Bird received, the more he shrank away from it. He began to case out side entrances, back doors, and less traveled routes whenever they arrived at a new arena. Media interviews were so unappealing to him that he often slipped out of the locker room before the reporters arrived. His behavior was initially puzzling to Nix. "I'm thinking, wow, this is unique," Nix said. "You've got to remember, I'm this stud from Chicago who is used to telling everyone what I've got. But Larry taught me not to get caught up in the limelight. I found myself trying to emulate him." Not everyone took the same approach. One day the team was discussing on the bus where to stop to eat, and one of the reserves, his voice dripping with sarcasm, sneered, "Whatever Larry wants." If such comments were hurtful to Bird, he never expressed that. Instead, he simply pushed his teammates harder. Some of those kids just didn't understand that Larry had elevated them to a height they never in their lives would have reached without him, Benke said. They were on a trip of a lifetime, but a couple of them were too jealous to enjoy it. "Somebody asked me once how I felt about all that," Bird said. "I told them, hell, I'm jealous of them too. I'm jealous because I never got to play with a Larry Bird." Bird was an imposing figure, even to his friends. When it came to basketball matters, they warily conformed to what their star demanded. It was clear who the leader of the team was, and if one of them got out of line, they'd be stopped, Larry said. During one practice early in the season, a couple of ISU players were horsing around instead of conducting the drills outlined by Hodges. Before the coach had to admonish them, his star player took care of it. "If you don't want to be here, then get the hell out," Bird shouted. When he wasn't playing, Bird was content to be just another guy on campus. He was at his happiest when they went down to the local college hangout, the Ballyho, and threw back a couple of drafts. When ISU played St. Louis, Hodges arranged for the team to take a side trip to the city zoo, where the players walked around wearing their cowboy hats and licking ice cream cones and making faces at the gorillas. "Like a bunch of little middle school kids," Nix said. The team loved their trips to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they frequented an all-you-can-eat spaghetti factory that offered several varieties of pasta and excellent saucy meatballs. The other highlight was being taken out to dinner after a big win by Bird's friend Max Gibson when he came to town. On those nights, the players knew they were going to enjoy the biggest and best meal of the year. Indiana State's final regular season game was against Wichita State, the only time all year the Sycamores were on national television. A major snowstorm enveloped Terre Haute, and when the team went to the arena to conduct their shoot-around on game day, the roof was leaking. "It was snowing like crazy," Bird said. "I felt sure they'd cancel the game." Georgia Bird weathered the near-whiteout conditions to arrive at the Holman Center and report that the roads were slippery, barely plowed, and most definitely unsafe. The teams played anyhow. Bird scored 49 points and grabbed 19 rebounds in front of a full house, with Al McGuire offering breathless commentary courtside. By the time the conference tournaments wrapped up, both Indiana State and Michigan State were awarded first-round byes in the NCAA tournament. The only way their paths would cross was if both teams advanced to the final. But first, the Spartans needed to eliminate a Lamar team coached by the colorful Billy Tubbs. Michigan State destroyed them, 95-64, behind Magic's triple-double, 13 points, 10 assists, and 17 rebounds. In his post-game press conference, Coach Tubbs strode up to the podium and tore up a fistful of papers. It was the scouting report he had purchased from Bill Burtka's respected scouting service, Burtka's Views. Burtka, a veteran coach and scout, who has been involved in the Lakers organization for more than 30 years, had identified the Spartans as a half-court team that walked the ball up the floor. Obviously, Burtka couldn't see all the games himself, so he hired high school coaches to scout teams for him, Heathcote said. Well, the high school coach that scouted us came to our game at Indiana. Bob Knight knew we wanted to run, so every time the ball went up, he sent 4 guys running back to midcourt. We never could get our fast break going, so I told Irvin, scrap it, just walk it up. From there, the Spartans rolled 87-71 over Louisiana State, then punched their ticket to the Final Four by upending Notre Dame, which was loaded with 7 future NBA draft picks: Bill Laimbeer, Orlando Woolridge, Kelly Tripucka, Bill Hanslick, Bruce Flowers, Tracy Jackson, and Rich Branning. Heathcote told his team the night before the game on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, "Men, this game is for the national championship. This is the best team you will play this season, even better than Indiana State." Heathcote fine-tuned his matchup zone, which was quickly becoming one of the most heralded defenses in college basketball, to fit the Fighting Irish personnel. Then he lathered his team into an emotional frenzy by reminding them that Notre Dame had refused to come to Jennison Fieldhouse during the regular season to play them. He also brought up the fact that Notre Dame was on television every Sunday. "We were on once, a national game against Kansas," Heathcote said. "I asked my guys, hey, aren't you tired of watching these Notre Dame players?" Michigan State beat Notre Dame with 34 points and 13 rebounds from Kelser and 19 points and 13 assists from Magic. The Spartans shot 63% in the second half. Indiana State cruised through its first 2 tournament games with an 89-69 win over Virginia Tech and a 93-72 win over Oklahoma. Bird averaged 25.5 points and 14 rebounds in the 2 games, which were impressive numbers considering he had fractured his left thumb in the Missouri Valley Conference Final against New Mexico State. Benke fashioned a makeshift splint to stabilize the thumb, but he could do little to limit the considerable pain Bird would be experiencing every time the ball made contact with the area. "I can't say the injury impaired him, but it had to hurt," Benke said. But there was never a discussion of him sitting. He was playing, no matter what. That was his mentality. Indiana State's final obstacle in its quest for a Final Four berth was Arkansas, led by Sidney Moncrief, Bird's former teammate in the World Invitational Tournament. The afternoon before the Arkansas game, Bird fielded a call from Auerbach, who was in town to watch the tournament and wanted Bird to come up to his hotel room for a few minutes. "Look, Larry," Red said, "when your team gets beat in the tournament, we'd love for you to come to Boston and finish the season with us." "You mean after the tournament?" Bird asked. "After you get beat here," Auerbach answered. "Well, Red, I don't think we're going to get beat," Bird answered. "I think we can take Arkansas." "We'll see, kid," retorted Auerbach. Bird scored 31 points and grabbed 10 rebounds against the Razorbacks, but it was his roommate Heaton who had earned the moniker Miracle Man for his last-second heroics, who again launched the winning shot. With the score tied 71-71 in the final seconds of the game, Heaton looked to get Bird the ball, but Bird was double-teamed. Heaton drove the lane with his natural right hand, and as Arkansas forward Scott Hastings slid over to help, Heaton switched the ball into his left hand and rolled in a shot as the buzzer sounded. Indiana State was going to the Final Four, and Auerbach was going home without his prized draft pick. The Terre Haute campus was a cauldron of excitement, with Sycamore mania bubbling over to the classrooms, the restaurants, even the city library. The semifinal matchups in Salt Lake City, the site of the Final Four, pitted Michigan State against Penn, the plucky Ivy League team that had shocked North Carolina earlier in the tournament, and DePaul against Indiana State. Michigan State's surprise opponent was a heavy underdog against the Spartans, but Penn's brash star, Tony Price, declared beforehand, "I don't fear Michigan State. They're just a bunch of dudes who play ball." The dudes demolished the Quakers 101-67. It was 50-17 at halftime, and Johnson added yet another triple-double to his resume: 29 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. Midway through the second half, Michigan State couldn't help but break an old cardinal rule in sports. They started to look ahead. "Now stay focused. Let's take care of this game first," Heathcote instructed his players. Magic looked directly at Heathcote. "Come on, Coach. They're the Ivies. We're not going to lose to them," he said. By the midway point of the second half, Heathcote admitted, all of the Spartans were thinking about one thing: how are we going to stop Bird? In the final moments of their thrashing of Penn, the Michigan State fans began chanting, "We want Bird! We want Bird!" The Sycamore fans responded in unison, "You'll get Bird! You'll get Bird!" Larry's Indiana State boys did not breeze into the championship like Magic's club. DePaul stars Mark Aguirre and Clyde Bradshaw made it clear they planned on playing a physical game and promised there would be no easy baskets for Bird. "They were talking all this trash about how they were going to manhandle us," Nick said. "I think it really pissed Larry off, and that's never a good idea." Michigan State's players sat in the stands and watched in disbelief as DePaul came out and guarded Bird in single coverage. Magic turned to Kelser and declared, "Big mistake." "Larry was hitting shots from all over the floor," Magic said. "I wasn't keeping stats or anything, but at one point I said, 'Hey, has that guy missed at all?'" Bird finished the game with 35 points on 16 of 19 shooting. His curious stat line also included 11 turnovers, a gaudy number that normally would have spelled doom for Indiana State. Nix attributed the miscues to two factors: a hyperactive Bird and nervous teammates who had trouble hanging on to his creative and often unexpected passes. "Those turnovers were my fault," Bird said. "Back then, I had a habit of passing off while I was jumping in the air. Too many times my teammates were already turning around to get in position for the rebound." Heathcote didn't notice Bird's turnovers. He was too mesmerized by Bird's unwavering confidence in his own shot and his ability to choose the perfect pass for the open man. "I don't mind telling you, Bird scared me," Heathcote said. "He was the kind of guy whose passing skills were so sharp he could cut your defense to ribbons." With the desired dream matchup of Bird versus Magic set for the NCAA final, the two teams arrived the day before the championship game for their respective press conferences. The national media anticipated that Larry would be a no-show, but he surprised them by taking his designated seat at the podium. The normally taciturn forward was both revealing and entertaining, even if some of his answers were not particularly loquacious. When asked, for instance, how his thumb felt, the self-described hick from French lick answered, "Broke." On the subject of what he'd do with the hundreds of thousands of dollars that awaited him in the NBA, Bird cracked, "I might buy everyone on the team a new car, and Brad Miley a jump shot." As Kelser and Johnson bounded into the press room with smiles and belly laughs and handshakes and high fives for some of the local reporters, Bird retreated to the side with Bill Hodges and did not make eye contact with either of his opponents. Magic took one step toward his former World Invitational teammate, but backed off when Bird made no motion to meet him halfway. "All I was doing was trying to say hi to the guy," Magic said. "Normally, at those things, you shake hands, make some small talk, but Larry wasn't having any of that." Johnson turned to Kelser and whispered, "Okay, then. I guess this isn't going to be a friendly one. You know what? Larry Bird, he's kind of a jerk. Once Magic was seated, he congenially answered the same questions over and over, with a new twist for each reporter. As he watched Johnson court the press, Bird understood who the media darling would be when the session was over. He found the magic touch to be grating. I just couldn't be like that, he said. I didn't want to be like that. All that hand-slapping stuff, it seemed phony to me. Bird had his reasons for snubbing the Michigan State players. He was angry to see both Kelser and Johnson representing the Spartans. His sidekick, Carl Nix, was back in the locker room instead of sitting with him, a slight he knew bothered his teammate deeply. They had two guys up there, Bird said. Why couldn't we? When Kelser and Magic arrived back at their hotel, Kelser gathered the team together and told them to start locking into their game assignments. This Bird guy is really serious, Kelser reported. He's already got his game face on. Heathcote spent his entire practice before the championship game devising ways to slow Bird. His frustration grew as one after another of his subs impersonated number 33, yet failed to duplicate the kind of offensive firepower Heathcote knew was coming. This isn't working, Heathcote said. You guys don't play anything like Bird. Irvin, you be Larry. You play just like him, only he has a jump shot. Magic bristled, grabbed the ball, and said, You want the real Larry Bird? Just watch me. Johnson began launching 15 and 20-foot shots, which were well beyond his normal range. He hit fallaways in the post, long baseline jumpers, and turnarounds in the key. I was loving it, Magic said. I think I hit about 15 in a row. Now Heathcote was agitated with his defense. Play him like he's Larry Bird, he admonished them. Are you going to give Larry Bird all those shots? After Magic buried his 10th in a row, Heathcote, his face crimson, blew the whistle and waved it off. I was so far out, my foot was out of bounds, said Magic. The evening before the championship game, Johnson organized a team trip to the movies. When the Spartans arrived at the theater, they spread out in different rows to watch the film. As the lights came up, they were chagrined to discover that some of them had been sitting near players from the Indiana State team. We heard a lot of comments, Nix reported, things like, It's on, man. You're going down. Nix reported these developments to Bird, who had not accompanied the Sycamores to the theater. Who cares what they say? Bird asked Nix. Larry didn't care, but some of our other guys were intimidated, Nix said. It seemed to me we had some guys who weren't feeling good about our chances. In the hours preceding the championship game, two college stars bunked down in the same city, but in separate hotels, wrestling with their bed sheets and obsessing over the other one's talent. Bird could not eliminate the image of Johnson prancing up the court and setting up Kelser for one of his thunderous, acrobatic alley-oop slams. He tried to visualize how his team could prevent the Spartans from running them off the floor. The problem, he quickly determined, was that Magic was too big for Nix to guard and too quick for Miley to guard. And if the Sycamores resorted to a double team, either Kelser or Vincent was apt to exploit it. Magic kept replaying Bird's offensive arsenal against DePaul in his mind and worrying about the versatile ways in which he was able to hurt them. Most of the other top college players they faced had one particular signature move. The problem with Larry was he could score from anywhere, Magic said. It was the first time in my life I was scared of another player. While Bird experienced his share of trepidation over Magic, he was equally concerned about the shortcomings of his own team. Two of their starters, Brad Miley, 50%, and Alex Gilbert, 28%, were horrendous foul shooters, and Bird knew that sooner or later it was going to catch up with them. His concern about free throws proved to be prophetic. ISU would hit only 10 of 22 from the line in the championship game, while Bird, who went on to be a career 88.5% free throw shooter in the NBA, would hit only 5 of his 8 free throws. On game day, Bird and Heaton sat side by side on adjacent training tables minutes before the tip-off. As Benke taped Bird's thumb, Heaton asked, "Larry, how you feeling?" "I feel sick, like I always do before every game," Bird answered. "I just want to get out there. The waiting is killing me." Hodges chose the 6'8" Miley to guard Magic instead of Nix, who had been making noise all week about wanting a piece of the Michigan State star. Just 15 seconds into the game, Magic up-faked once and easily drove left past Miley. Magic tripped over Miley's feet, stumbled awkwardly, and was called for a travel. But he knew he was onto something. "I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have my way with this guy," Magic said. Johnson was shocked that Nix didn't draw the assignment. After watching several hours of film on Nix pressuring guards, he had braced himself for an assault of full-court pressure. With Miley guarding him, he knew that was no longer a worry. Steve Reed drew first blood for Indiana State with a jumper from the top of the foul circle, thereby negating the early knockout punch Magic and Heathcote were seeking. "But I didn't care about that basket," Johnson said. Johnson credited with the basket, but he was also awarded 2 free throws for a flagrant foul, a dubious call that even Heathcote concedes could have gone either way. The image of Magic soaring over Heaton appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated a few days later, declaring Michigan State the national champions. In the final 4 minutes, without a 24-second clock to limit their time of possession, MSU went to a spread offense and ticked off as much time as they could by passing the ball around the perimeter. Bird, frustrated by their stall tactics, swatted the ball out of Magic's hands as he was inbounding it, then laid it in for 2. The basket was waved off and Bird was called for a technical. He did not react to the call. He merely turned and ran back down the floor, his blond head bowed. Once the buzzer sounded, and Michigan State's 75-64 victory was officially in the books, Bird quickly located Johnson, shook his hand, and congratulated him for having the better team. Bird checked out with mortal numbers: 19 points on 7 of 21 shooting attempts, with 13 rebounds and 2 assists. Yet what haunts him to this day are the missed free throws. "It's the one thing I'll never get over," Bird said.
This is the end of disc number 2. Please insert disc number 3. This is disc number 3.
Once the buzzer sounded, and Michigan State's 75-64 victory was officially in the books, Bird quickly located Johnson, shook his hand, and congratulated him for having the better team. Bird checked out with mortal numbers: 19 points on 7 of 21 shooting attempts, with 13 rebounds and 2 assists. Yet what haunts him to this day are the missed free throws. "It's the one thing I'll never get over," Bird said. Magic was too busy celebrating with his teammates to notice the anguish of his opponent. It wasn't until later, with his arm draped around a young announcer named Bryant Gumbel, that Magic noticed Bird sitting on his bench, his face buried in a towel. Johnson had just been named the game's most outstanding player on the strength of his 24 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. But suddenly he felt a pang of sympathy for his rival. "I spent all week wanting to beat Bird in the worst way, but when it happened, I found myself feeling kind of bad," Magic said. "I knew how much it meant to Larry. I cried the year before when we lost to Kentucky. Bird declined to attend the post-game press conference. He remained, head down, choking back tears in that towel for several minutes after the game ended. "What hit me most was it was all over," Bird said. "I didn't know where I was going. I hadn't signed with the Celtics yet, and I had no clue what was next. And it was just killing me. We were out there playing so hard, and no matter what we did, it wasn't going to happen." In subsequent years, as the stature of Bird and Magic increased, the championship game was rehashed and re-scrutinized hundreds of times. Bird conceded that if the two teams played again, Michigan State would beat Indiana State 9 times out of 10. Maybe even 10 out of 10, he admitted. Their epic games sparked an interest in college basketball that exploded in subsequent years. 3 decades later, the NCAA basketball tournament was one of the most hyped and eagerly anticipated events in sports, its roots firmly planted in the drama of Magic and Larry. After their showdown, both players went home to a hero's welcome. The Spartans were treated to a ticker-tape parade featuring Magic lounging in a convertible, waving to his adoring public. The Sycamores were greeted by more than 10,000 smitten fans upon their return to Terre Haute, and Bird was later presented with a key to the city. Heathcote spent 16 more seasons at Michigan State, earning legendary status for guiding the team to the first title in school history. Hodges was dismissed from Indiana State 3 seasons later and never given another opportunity to coach a major college program. Bird and Magic moved on to professional basketball. Together, of course. Whenever Hodges ran into Heathcote, he'd whack his rival on the back and say, "Remember, Jet, you're the one who ruined my life." Bird vowed to make sure he would never have to say the same to Magic Johnson. Chapter 3. May 16, 1980. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The rookie was sitting in the captain's seat. Usually, only veterans claimed dibs on the roomier bulkhead rows on the commercial airlines, which were not designed to comfortably transport athletes with an average height of 6'6" across the country. Had Lakers captain and perennial all-star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar been on board, he would have assumed his customary spot on the bulkhead aisle. But Abdul-Jabbar was back in Los Angeles nursing a badly sprained ankle, and the timing of the injury couldn't have been worse. The Lakers were playing the Philadelphia 76ers in the 1980 NBA Finals, and as they headed east for Game 6, they were forced to depart without Kareem, the epicenter of the Lakers' offense, a towering combination of skill and finesse with a trademark skyhook that was one of the most effective weapons in the league. The notion of playing without Abdul-Jabbar at the most critical point of the season, with L.A. ahead 3-2 in games and on the cusp of winning it all, was momentarily paralyzing. Lakers coach Paul Westhead announced in practice he would plug Kareem's hole with Irvin Magic Johnson, the precocious rookie who had skipped into training camp as the number 1 pick in the 1979 draft. Westhead's strategy puzzled some of his veterans. Magic was a point guard, accustomed to running the show. Now it appeared he would be the show. "I wasn't sure what Westhead's intent was," confessed veteran Jamal Wilkes. "I guess he was saying, we just lost our best player, but we have this young, charismatic phenom who is going to make it all right." If there was any question whether that young phenom was up to the task, Magic eliminated all doubt when he boldly walked past his more seasoned teammates and settled in Kareem's premium seat for the flight to Philadelphia. As the 20-year-old turned around, he flashed his pearly whites and declared, "Never fear, EJ is here." Magic could see the players' spirits were flagging, but felt with the smaller, quicker lineup the Lakers could strike with their transition game. It was a huge mistake, he believed, to write off Game 6 and pin their hopes all on Game 7, when Abdul-Jabbar might or might not be back. "Okay, fellas, you know what?" Magic said. "We're looking at a wide-open game here. This might be all right. Let's put our track shoes on and run these guys out of the building." Johnson pulled big man Jim Chones aside and asked him how he should defend Caldwell Jones, who, at 6 feet 11 inches, would enjoy a height advantage. Chones reminded Magic that Jones was not a threat from the perimeter, but an exceptional rebounder who needed to be boxed out completely. "One more thing," Chones cautioned. "Caldwell likes to come over from the weak side to block shots. Be aware of it, or he'll make you look bad." On game day in Philadelphia, the rookie breezed through the locker room, selling LA's potentially catastrophic hole in their lineup without Kareem as an opportunity, an adventure. "Hey, Norm," he said to veteran guard Norm Nixon, "we're so worried about how we're going to stop them. Well, who is going to guard us?" Michael Cooper watched Magic working the room like a nightclub singer in a cocktail lounge. Professional athletes generally become jaded as the years pass, scoffing at the rallying cries of youngsters who have just exited the college ranks and still believe in pom-poms and fight songs. As Johnson stopped at each locker, preaching his gospel of optimism, Cooper mused, "He's giving his own pep rally." The rally was successful because Magic's energy was contagious. Wilkes, often a facilitator for Kareem, started envisioning himself slashing to the hole. Nixon perked up at the idea of more shots. Chones volunteered to hound the massive Darryl Dawkins, a force in the middle whose self-proclaimed nickname, Chocolate Thunder, indicated the power with which he played the game. "We went from thinking we couldn't win to talking like we would win," Cooper said. On the night of Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals, Celtics forward Larry Bird sat with a small group of friends in a Boston club awaiting the Lakers-Sixers showdown. The elimination of his Celtics team by Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference Finals had deprived him of the opportunity to face Earvin Magic Johnson and even the score of their increasingly personal rivalry. Unlike most of America, which was forced to watch the game on tape delay because no major network was willing to run the NBA Finals in prime time during its sweeps period, Bird watched the game in real time. He had a friend in the television business who arranged for a live feed to be pumped into the restaurant. As he lamented his own rookie season, which he felt ended prematurely at the hands of Julius Erving and the Sixers, Bird admitted to his buddies he was curious how Magic would fare. He knew by charting Magic's productive box scores that he had become L.A.'s everyman. Yet even so, when Bird saw his rivals step into the circle for the opening tap, he guffawed. "You gotta be kidding me," Bird said. "Magic can't jump." Johnson didn't win the tip, but that was the only moment when his game fell short that evening. He was a catalyst offensively, driving the lane and knocking down fallaways. He was an agitator defensively, using his strong body to knock Philly off the ball. He was, as always, the most expressive player on the floor. He led Los Angeles on a 7-0 run to start the game and never looked back. "I found myself rooting for him, even though I didn't like him," Bird said. Although the game was tied 60-60 at halftime, Johnson was buoyant. Chones, as promised, was thwarting Dawkins. The Sixers, as Magic predicted, were flummoxed by the Lakers' new lineup. When Johnson started hitting shots over Caldwell Jones, they switched Erving onto him. Then they tried Bobby Jones. It didn't matter. None of them could derail Earvin Johnson's momentum. "I knew exactly how Magic was feeling," Bird said. "There are times when you get it going, and you are in this incredible place, this zone, where you are controlling the game. You feel no matter what you try, it's going to work. It's the greatest feeling in the world because no one can stop you. And nobody was going to stop Magic that night. The Lakers won the title with a 123-107 victory. Magic was an NBA champion on his first try without his captain, a future Hall of Famer, in the lineup. He logged 47 out of a possible 48 minutes, was a perfect 14 of 14 from the free throw line, and finished with 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. It was an unprecedented performance. Johnson was the youngest Finals MVP in history and the first rookie ever to win the award. Bird witnessed Magic's brilliance with conflicting emotions. He marveled at his ability and his poise under pressure, but was also overcome with envy. He left the bar feeling unsettled. I was jealous and ticked off, but at the same time, I was in total awe of what he had done, Bird said. By the time he arrived home, Bird had calmed down, until he watched Johnson's highlights on the news and became agitated all over again. Damn, Bird said. I've got to win one of these things. Championships. This guy's got 2 in a row. He's making me look bad. Irvin Magic Johnson had a knack for making things look easy. Yet his decision to turn professional and subsequent indoctrination with the vaunted Lakers was stressful, emotional, and in the beginning, painfully lonely. Magic was a pleaser, and in the spring of 1979, while he was still plucking confetti from Michigan State's championship victory parade out of his afro, his Spartan teammates were already pleading with him. Come on, man, stay with us. Let's go for 2 championships. For a moment, he was legitimately tempted. Johnson had 2 seasons of eligibility left, loved being the Magic Man on campus, and felt the Spartans could repeat as champions if he stayed in school. Yet the lure of the NBA was irresistible. Greg Kelser was graduating and had already hired an agent who promoted himself, in part, by saying he had done some work for NBA star Julius Erving. Erving was one of Magic's idols. Dr. J signed with the Virginia Squires of the ABA after leaving the University of Massachusetts early and had thrived as a professional. Forbidden by NCAA regulations to dunk in college, Erving became the master of high-flying slams, and when the ABA merged with the NBA, Dr. J became one of the league's first bona fide superstars. Do you think your agent could hook me up on the phone with Dr. J? Magic asked Kelser. I'd like to ask him his advice. Erving knew all about Johnson and his gifted passing skills. He not only agreed to talk with him, he invited Magic and Kelser to stay at his suburban Philadelphia home during the 1979 NBA playoffs. They bunked in the guest room, fussed over by Erving's wife Turquoise, and were given passes into the Sixers' locker room. Both players were amazed at how big the pro players were, far more imposing than they appeared on 24-inch black-and-white television sets. Dr. J sat down with Johnson and briefed him on the challenge in front of him. Erving had left school as a college junior, and by doing so missed an opportunity to be an Olympian. Magic would also be giving up that dream if he went pro, he said. Dr. J explained that whatever decision he made, someone would be disappointed. If you go pro, some of your college teammates will resent you. If you stay in school, your family might be upset you won't be in a position to assist them financially. Erving also outlined the difference between a college basketball season and the long, often grueling lifestyle of a professional basketball player. Are you ready to be in a man's world? Erving asked. This is 82 games now, not 30. Can you handle the demands on your body? Can you handle the drudgery? It's going to be totally different. You think you know, but trust me, you don't. Be ready for the ups and downs, because they're coming. Magic was ready. He had been waiting for this moment since he was 12 years old. He declared himself eligible for the NBA draft and braced himself for the inevitable commotion it would cause. His decision was indeed a newsmaker, but not in the manner he expected. An article by Joe Falls of the Detroit Free Press detailed why Johnson would not make a good pro. Falls questioned, correctly at that time, whether Magic had the range or the accuracy to be a legitimate outside shooter. He maintained that Magic's no-look passes wouldn't be successful in the NBA and called into question Johnson's defensive capabilities. Falls was also skeptical that a player of Johnson's size could succeed as a point guard in a league that put a premium on quickness and athleticism. Magic had known Falls since high school. He was an influential columnist, and his words were stunning. They also ticked Johnson off. "Did you hear about this?" he asked Kelser, whom he roused out of bed with an early morning telephone call. "Did you read Joe Falls this morning?" said Magic to Heathcote when he arrived at the Spartans' gym. Don't worry, that's just Joe," Heathcote said. Johnson was already motivated to make his mark in the NBA, but Falls' prose became the impetus he needed to stay an extra hour, shoot an extra 100 jump shots, and run through an extra set of defensive slides. "Joe Falls did me a favor," Magic said. "He helped me get ready for the NBA as much as anybody." Johnson's new NBA home would be determined by a coin flip between the Chicago Bulls and the Los Angeles Lakers to see who selected first in the 1979 draft. After meeting with Johnson, Bulls general manager Rod Thorne and coach Jerry Sloan, an old-school coach who abhorred glitz and flair, were giddy at the prospect of building around him. Magic was just so disarming because of his charisma, Thorne said. "We were asking him questions, but the next thing you know, he was interviewing us. Even Jerry was getting excited." Magic's visit with the Lakers also went well. He walked out convinced they would take him if they selected first, until he read an LA Times article on the plane ride home discussing general manager Jerry West's fascination with Arkansas star Sidney Moncrief, the team's plans to bring in UCLA forward David Greenwood for an interview, and speculation that the Lakers could use the draft selection to trade for a power forward. "Maybe they don't like me as much as I think," he confided to his father. What Magic didn't know was that Dr. Jerry Buss, the future owner of the Lakers who was about to buy the team from Jack Kent Cooke, told the Lakers front office that he expected the team to draft Magic. "They resisted because Jerry West really liked Moncrief too," Buss said, "but I told them it's Magic or find yourself another buyer." The coin flip was determined over a squawk box in an empty conference room. Thorne was in Chicago, Lakers executive Bill Sharman was in Los Angeles, and the NBA's legal counsel, David Stern, was in New York, presiding over the toss. The Bulls capitalized on the event as a promotional opportunity to let the fans vote on whether the call should be heads or tails. The Chicago fans voted heads. "It came up tails," Thorne said. "They got a Hall of Famer in Magic Johnson, and we got David Greenwood." Greenwood played 6 years for the Bulls and enjoyed an unremarkable career that spanned 12 seasons and 4 teams. Larry Bird's NBA destination was already secure in the spring of 1979, but the timing of his arrival in Boston remained in doubt. When Indiana State's season finally ended in heartbreak in Salt Lake City at the hands of Michigan State, the Celtics made a pitch to sign Bird for the final 8 games of their season. He declined in order to complete his student teaching obligations so he could finally earn his diploma. That meant reporting to West Vigo High School in Terre Haute as a physical education and health teacher and assistant baseball coach. Bird was scheduled to begin in March, but each time Indiana State advanced in the tournament, he called West Vigo's baseball coach Dave Ballinger to apologize and postpone his arrival. After the third call, Ballinger finally told Bird, "What are you apologizing for? I'm going to the game." Although Auerbach was persuasive in his argument to lure Bird to Boston, informing Bird that he would be the first player in history to compete in both an NCAA game and NBA game in the same month, the young forward opted instead to teach flag football, badminton, and dodgeball. His duties also included teaching a CPR course and driver's education. While the Celtics dropped 7 of those final 8 regular games, Bird tooled around with high school students in a specially equipped vehicle that had a brake on the passenger side in case the young drivers panicked. "We had some close calls," Bird said, "but I always had my left hand ready in case I needed to grab the wheel." Bird's most difficult and rewarding assignment at West Vigo was the 3 or 4 times he taught a classroom of mentally disabled children. He spent the majority of the class chasing his students down the hall and ushering them back to their seats after they bolted upright and scampered out of the room without warning. It was an unbelievable experience, Bird said, and at times very overwhelming. "I can't tell you how much respect I have for people who have made it their life's work to help those kids." In the evening, Bird played basketball at the Boys and Girls Club in Terre Haute and occasionally filled in for Bob Heaton's softball team. One night in early April, he arrived at the Diamond to discover that his brother Mike was on the opposite team. Bird was manning left field when Mike lofted a line drive toward him. The fly ball started out straight, then sank dramatically at the last moment, like a Tim Wakefield knuckleball. Larry bent down on one knee to make a basket catch, but the ball smashed his finger and bent it backward. He felt an odd, tingling sensation, and when he picked up the ball and tried to throw it, his finger curved around at an unnatural angle, as though he was a Saturday morning cartoon character with exaggerated, elastic limbs. "I looked down," Bird said, "and my finger was all the way over to the other side of my hand." Bird's mangled finger was so grotesque that his brother Mike nearly vomited when he examined it. Bird's girlfriend, Dinah Mattingly, rushed him to a nearby hospital where emergency room personnel took x-rays and immobilized his finger in a splint. He slept fitfully that night, with his throbbing finger robbing him of any prolonged sleep. Bird's alarm was set for an early morning wake-up call to go mushroom hunting, and he was hell-bent on sticking to his plans. There is a 6-week period each year when rare morel mushrooms grow in Indiana. They range in size and color depending on the month, and they are extremely difficult to find. Bird had been hunting mushrooms for years and was annoyed that his aching finger threatened to ruin his day. It never once occurred to him that it also might ruin the upcoming season of the Boston Celtics. He popped a couple of aspirin and went hunting anyhow. After emerging from the woods just before dark, his brother informed him, "There's a doctor looking for you. He checked your x-rays, and you need to get to Indianapolis right away." The news was alarming. Bird's knuckle was shattered, and he needed surgery to remove bone chips and insert several pins to stabilize the finger. "How long is it going to take before it's healed?" Bird asked the surgeon. "Healed?" the surgeon replied. "Son, I'm not sure it will." After the procedure, the doctor attempted to immobilize the finger by putting a clip behind Bird's fingernail. Then he attached a mechanism running the length of his wrist to hold the finger in place. One evening, while Bird was watching television, the clip gave way and the fingernail ripped off, leaving Bird yelping in pain and splattered with his own blood. He had not yet signed a contract with the Celtics, nor had he informed them of his injury. When Auerbach learned of his draft pick surgery, he summoned Bird to Boston. By then, the forward was working out again, yet he still visited the godfather of Celtics basketball with some uneasiness. "I just didn't have the same feel for the ball as I did before," Bird said. "I was sure Red would notice." Team physician Dr. Thomas Silva didn't like what he saw. He told Auerbach that the knuckle would never repair completely, and Bird would not have the same range of motion. In his estimation, the young forward was damaged goods. The Celtics boss listened, then directed Bird out to the court. He threw him the ball and told him, "Shoot it." Bird buried one jumper, then another, then another. Although his feel wasn't the same, his range was intact. So Auerbach threw him a bounce pass, then a chest pass, then an overhead pass. Bird nimbly caught them all. "If he was in pain," Auerbach said, "he did a pretty good job of disguising it. He was one tough kid." The general manager put his arm around his young forward. "I'm not worried about this," Red said. For the first time since he arrived in Boston, Bird exhaled. As time went on, Bird's finger built up calcium deposits and became grossly disfigured. Once, while Bird was posing for a cover shot for Sports Illustrated, the photographer told Bird to hold up his finger to signify that he and the Celtics were number one. But when Bird held up his ghastly digit, it looked more like, "We're number 10. The photographer shot him using his opposite hand instead. Although he still went on to bury some of the biggest shots in NBA history, Bird concedes nearly 30 years after the fact that Dr. Silva's diagnosis was correct. "I never could shoot as well again," he said. Magic Johnson spent the better part of August 1979 working solely on his own perimeter game. Dr. Charles Tucker, a school counselor from Lansing and a former ball player who became Magic's agent, warned him that teams would sag off him and double-team Kareem until the kid proved he could stroke the jumper. "No one is going to sag off me without paying for it," Magic grunted in between sessions. He signed a 5-year, $2.3 million contract with a $175,000 signing bonus, and he couldn't imagine what he'd do with all that money. Buss asked him to move to Los Angeles to get acclimated to his new home, and Johnson happily obliged. Magic was 19 years old. He didn't know anyone and was overwhelmed by the sprawling, glittery city and its daunting freeways. His new teammates were much older, and many of them were married with families. His first month in his new city, he was completely alone. Buss owned an apartment complex in Culver City and suggested the rookie move in there since it was near the practice facility, the airport, and the Forum. Johnson bought himself a new color television and spent his days watching Perry Mason and dialing home. He missed the chaos of his house in Lansing, which always seemed too small, too loud, and too cluttered, but now seemed so inviting. On Sunday nights, he'd call and ask his sister Pearl to describe what his mother Christine was cooking. Then he'd hang up and order takeout. Again. One morning, Buss called to check on him. "Do you like football?" the owner asked. 3 hours later, Magic was on the field at the USC game, standing next to the coaches and the players. The Lakers' season hadn't started, and Magic had yet to play for L.A., yet he was serenaded by the college football crowd with doting cheers of "Magic! Magic!" "Dr. Buss!" Magic exclaimed. "They know who I am!" Buss and Johnson, the two new guys on the Lakers block, became constant companions. They both loved chocolate donuts, which they shared on Saturday mornings. They enjoyed shooting pool and competed in epic ping-pong battles. The owner liked to frequent exclusive nightclubs, and while Johnson was not a drinker, he went along anyhow, socializing with some of the wealthiest people in Los Angeles. Buss took Magic to fellow real estate mogul Donald Sterling's famous annual Malibu party. Sterling, who would later purchase the Los Angeles Clippers, owned a stunning waterfront home and served aqua-colored martinis and cocktails with miniature umbrellas floating on top. Magic was awed by the music, the food, and the women, but mostly he was mesmerized by the rolling surf. "I was from Michigan," he explained. "I had never seen the ocean before." When he got home from the party, he called Greg Kelser, his childhood friend Dale Beard, his girlfriend Cookie, and his mother. "You won't believe where I was tonight," he told each of them. "I was at the beach, right on the water, with all the movers and the shakers." A week later, Bus took Magic to Friday night at the Playboy Mansion. It was movie night, only Magic couldn't concentrate on the film because there were too many beautiful women to distract him. That prompted another series of phone calls back home to say, "Guess where I was?" Except this time he left his mom and Cookie off the call list. Bus took his point guard to the exclusive Pips in Beverly Hills to dance alongside the biggest Hollywood names. "There's Prince, there's Sylvester Stallone, there's Michael Douglas," Johnson would say, rattling off the parade of stars. "It blew me away," Magic admitted. "And what blew me away even more was they knew me." Night after night, he and Bus toured the town. Bus brought lots of women with him on their excursions, and he'd dance disco, the waltz, and the tango with them for hours. When he got tired, he'd turn to Johnson and say, "Irvin, dance with these ladies." Sometimes Bus and Magic would go to Vegas, where Bus would win or lose thousands of dollars in a half hour. Whenever the Lakers owner decided he had reached his limit, they'd go dancing again. Although they spent countless hours together, they rarely talked about basketball. Bus wanted his prize investment to think beyond that. "Irvin, take care of your money," Bus told him. "What do you want to do after basketball?" The goal of the Lakers' flamboyant owner was to create a basketball team with Hollywood flair. Doris Day and Frank Sinatra were already regulars at the Forum, but Bus knew he'd made it when Sean Connery called him one evening and asked if there was room for Agent 007 in his box. "Once people saw Magic play," said Bus, "everyone wanted in." Before Johnson's arrival, the Lakers' Summer League games typically drew around 3,500 people. For Magic's first outing, more than 10,000 fans showed up. There was a similar buzz in Boston, where Bird was already being billed as the savior who would turn around a franchise that had won only 29 games the previous season. Bird was wary of the city, especially after looking out the window of his downtown hotel room at the Parker House and watching a flock of Hare Krishnas dressed in robes chanting on the common. His owner, Harry Mangurian, was not interested in nightlife, casinos, or scantily clad women. He was a racehorse enthusiast who shook Bird's hand once and left it at that. He didn't seem all that interested in basketball, Bird said. It was his wife who was the big fan. While Boston certainly had its share of exclusive restaurants and trendy nightclubs, Bird did not frequent any of them. He was content to drink a six-pack of beer in the kitchen of his modest Brookline home. The team went to a steakhouse one night before the season to have dinner, but the rookie did not attend. He was busy mowing his yard. He was thankful that Dinah was moving to Boston with him. Bird could be impetuous and hot-headed, but Dinah was his valued alter ego. Just as he was about to make a rash decision, she would pointedly tell him, "I'd think about that if I were you." "She talked me out of doing a lot of dumb things," Bird said. They met at Indiana State during one of the more chaotic times of his life. His father had committed suicide a year earlier, and his family was struggling financially. Bird married a childhood friend, Janet Condra, right after he enrolled at Indiana State, but the couple divorced in 1976. During a brief and failed reconciliation, Condra became pregnant and had a daughter, Corey. Bird's attorneys asked for a paternity test, and by the time it was proven that Corey was Larry's child, she was already a toddler who had seen very little of her father. Larry was dating Dinah by then and refused to be a part of his daughter's life, a decision that haunts him to this day. It was Dinah who urged him through the years to make contact with Corey and attempt to forge a relationship with her. Dinah, who later became his wife, also helped him navigate a private life that became very public as his stature grew. "She has always been the mature one," Bird said. "I was a difficult guy to live with sometimes, especially when I was playing. She probably loved it when I came back from shoot-around and took a nap, so I was out of her hair. I was lucky. Dinah was always independent, but she always supported me too, and there were times when I really needed it." In the beginning, Bird didn't venture out in Boston much. Like magic, he knew no one in his new city, and he couldn't have picked his coach, Bill Fitch, out of a lineup. When Bird attended his introductory press conference in Boston, he was anxiously waiting for the proceedings to begin when a portly gentleman came up to him and began discussing the Celtics personnel. Bird politely answered his questions, but was nervous and distracted and wanted the man to leave him alone. Finally, when it came time for the press conference to start, Bird excused himself and took his place on the dais. To his surprise, the man joined him. "Larry," he said, "I'm your coach, Bill Fitch." Fitch would soon become unforgettable. He was a disciplined tactician who held his players accountable for every detail. He was organized and unyielding, and his basketball knowledge left an indelible impression on Bird. Fitch became the standard by which Bird would later model his own coaching career. The other major influence in his early years was Red Auerbach, the legendary Boston sports hero who built the Celtics dynasty, first as a coach and then in the front office. Red's signature move was to light up a cigar when his team had a game clinched. Often, he did this on the bench during the game in a building that was clearly marked "No Smoking." Auerbach didn't believe in mincing words, and that suited Bird just fine. The 62-year-old patriarch was fiercely competitive and fiercely loyal. Bird liked him immediately. In fact, the two men were alike in many ways. Both had the uncommon ability to size up people in a matter of minutes, and each could be horribly stubborn. When Bird reported to rookie camp, Auerbach coaxed him into playing tennis in between sessions. Then, when the regular season started, Larry became Auerbach's regular racquetball partner. "Red was an angles guy," Bird said. "I hate to admit this, but he did cheat on the score. He really hated losing." Occasionally, Auerbach would take Bird to eat at his favorite Chinese restaurant in Marshfield, Massachusetts, where the team's rookie camp was held. It was there that Auerbach would recite the proud history of the franchise Bird was joining. "It's an honor to be a Celtic," Auerbach told him. "You should never forget that." The Celtics' summer league digs were no-frills accommodations that included courts with rims of varying heights. Auerbach ran a summer camp for kids there, and his pro players were expected to eat with the campers in the mess hall and lecture the kids in between workouts. Normally, veterans didn't bother to attend, but once word got out that Bird was in town, M.L. Carr and Dave Cowens just happened to drop in. Cowens was a Celtics favorite, an undersized center who played all-star basketball with uncommon passion and energy. He was the best front-court player on the team when Bird arrived. Carr was a wily veteran who had come over from Detroit, where he led the league in steals. Auerbach warned Bird ahead of time that Carr would jump his passing lanes and try to distract him with his nonstop banter. "I got this one," said Carr, pointing to Bird the first time they scrimmaged. Carr poked him, banged him, muscled him. "Come on, Rook," he said in a voice low enough for Bird and no one else to hear. "Is that all you've got?" Because Auerbach had tipped him off, Bird was careful to step forward to meet the ball, thereby cutting down on Carr's opportunities to pick off the pass. He also refused to be rattled by Carr's chatter. Bird was content to feed his new teammates with scoring opportunities while eschewing most of his own. "I've never seen anyone who could beat you with the pass the way Larry did," Carr said. "He'd bait you like he was going to shoot and sucker the defense in, then deliver the pass to someone else on the money." By the time training camp started, Bird's initiation was almost complete. There was one veteran left who wanted a piece of him, and that was Cedric Maxwell, a slender forward who was as proud of his trash-talking as he was of his low-post moves. He played 2-on-2 after practice with Bird, Carr, and Rick Roby, and led Bird onto the block where he spanked him with a series of up fakes and step-backs. "He didn't really know how to play defense yet," Maxwell said. When it was Bird's turn on offense, Maxwell stood with his hands at his side, daring the rookie to beat him. Bird started drilling shots. He hit them from 15 feet, then moved back to 20 feet, and then finally to 25 feet. By then, Maxwell was frantically trying to halt the comeuppance by blanketing him with his spindly arms. It was too late. Larry Bird was torching him. "Damn," Maxwell said to Carr. "That white boy can shoot." Once the Celtics veterans were done challenging Bird, they went about the business of protecting him. There was resentment among some black players who couldn't understand why there was so much hype surrounding a white rookie who, as far as they could tell, couldn't run or jump. Carr recalled forward Maurice Lucas telling him before a game in Bird's first season, "I'm going to take down the great Larry Bird." "Oh, yeah?" Carr said. "Well, you're going to have to go through me first." Magic underwent a similar rite of passage in Lakers training camp. Coach Jack McKinney put him on the second team and left him there for days. He stressed to Johnson that his decision-making would be the most important component of his job description. McKinney advised the rookie to remain respectful and to know his place. Johnson willingly fetched Kareem's paper, bought him hot dogs in the airport, and nicknamed him Cap, so there was never any doubt who ranked atop the Lakers' hierarchy. And yet, Magic was a born leader on the court and couldn't suppress those tendencies. "It was potentially a big problem," Buss said. "The way Irvin played the game, he just had to be in charge. At the same time, you had this Hall of Fame player who had already won before." Johnson endeared himself to his teammates with his hustle and his unselfishness. Norm Nixon nicknamed him Buck because he was always galloping around like a young deer. Although the veterans knew Magic spent time with Buss, nobody was aware of how close the owner and the rookie had become, and therefore no one objected. "The extra hand-holding made sense because he was so young," Wilkes said. "I don't think Irvin had any intentions of crossing the line. I'm not sure he even understood he was crossing the line." Johnson may have been a teenager, but he played with the swagger of a veteran. In his first practice with the Lakers, he turned it over twice because Wilkes, a three-time All-Star, wasn't ready for the pass. "Magic!" McKinney reprimanded him. "You can't make those passes. This isn't college." Johnson fumed. He was embarrassed to be singled out and furious that Wilkes didn't make the play. The next time down the floor, Magic waited until Wilkes cut through the key. Then the moment Wilkes turned, fired the ball at him. "Jamal," he said evenly, "I'm going to keep hitting you in the head until you look." Wilkes became the ideal complement to Magic's exceptional court vision. He moved gracefully with or without the ball, hence his nickname, Silk, and had great hands. He also knew how to use a pick better than anyone Johnson had ever played with before. He didn't object to the rookie's admonishment because, Wilkes said, he was right. After that, I always looked. Not everyone responded as positively to the confident rookie. Johnson was outplaying teammate Ron Boone in practice, and when the two went up for a rebound, Boone purposely whacked Magic in the back of the head. As they ran down the floor, Magic said, "You better know I'm going to get you back." "Keep moving, rookie. You're not going to do anything," Boone replied. Magic delivered his payback in the form of a fist to Boone's neck. Boone crashed to the floor and came up swinging. "Don't you ever do that shit to me again," Johnson shouted. "Magic, get off the floor," McKinney barked. "Bullshit," Magic retorted. "He hit me first, and when I retaliate, you're going to throw me off the court? Get off the floor," McKinney repeated. "I might be a rookie, but none of you are going to punk me," Magic said. "You're dealing with the wrong guy if you do." Johnson sat on the sideline for the remainder of the practice, then left without speaking. For the next 6 days, he dominated practice, knocking down shots and firing pinpoint passes, each delivered with his teeth gritted. Jerry West tried to calm him, but Magic was unmoved. "Jerry," he said, "I can smile nice, but I can fight mean too if I have to." On October 12, 1979, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird made their pro debuts on opposite ends of the country. Bird, operating on East Coast time, was in the starting lineup against the Houston Rockets in Boston Garden. His performance was unremarkable from a statistical standpoint because he was in foul trouble for most of the night and watched the Celtics pull away for a 114-105 win from the bench. His coming-out party proved to be the next night in Cleveland, where he poured in 28 points. Because California was 3 hours behind Boston, Bird was showered, dressed, and settled in his family room to watch Magic's first professional regular season game in San Diego. When Johnson fed Kareem for a skyhook at the buzzer to win it, Johnson was so ecstatic that he jumped into the big fella's arms. "What the hell is he doing?" Bird said to Dinah. Kareem wondered the same thing. When they got back to their locker room, he reminded Magic that they still had 81 more games to go. "He'll burn out in a week if he keeps going at this pace," Norm Nixon observed. Nixon was wrong. The young buck played at one speed every day. Full speed. He never wanted a day off, never ran easy, never let up. His energy level was a constant. "He charged ahead at everything," Wilkes said, "and what it did was put tremendous pressure on the rest of us to match that kind of commitment." 1 month into his professional career, after lighting up the Denver Nuggets for 31 points, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds, Magic confessed, "There are some nights I feel like I can do anything out there." 4 weeks later, Bird pinned a triple-double, 23 points, 19 rebounds, and 10 assists on the Phoenix Suns, and Riley noted, "Some nights, the game just seems really easy." The NBA couldn't believe its good fortune. It had been saddled with drug scandals, image problems, and dwindling revenues, but this budding rivalry between two remarkable rookies had revitalized 2 of its kingpin cities. Boston's vice president, Jan Volk, sensed something special was going on when the team played a Wednesday night game against Utah, against the televised World Series, and sold out anyway. "None of our fans could name a player from Utah," Volk said. "They were coming to see Larry." They only played each other twice during the regular season. Just as he had done during the NCAA final, Bird refused to engage in any banter with Johnson. During their December tilt, the only time the two exchanged words was when Bird leveled Magic as he drove to the basket. The two rookies stared each other down before teammates stepped in. "I thought Larry and I had some kind of connection after the NCAA championship," said Magic. "I guess he was making it clear he didn't feel the same way. So I made up my mind. I'm done trying to be nice to this guy. I'm just going to beat him instead." The Lakers went on to take both regular season games that season, irritating Bird even further.